This is the Humanist Report with Mike Figueredo.
The Humanist Report podcast is funded by viewers like you through Patreon and PayPal. To support the show, visit patreon.com/Humanist Report or become a member at humanistreport.com. Now, enjoy the show.
Welcome to the Humanist Report podcast. My name is Mike Figueredo, and this is episode 249 of the program. Today is Friday, July 10th, and before we get started, I want to thank the people who make this show possible, all of our newest Patreon, PayPal, and YouTube members who signed up just this last week to support us or increase their monthly pledge, and that includes Aganar D. Figueredo, like that name, Bill Whitson, Chad Halsey, Jacob Torrey, Kieran Lewis, Rodney Nelson, Theodore Pulver, and Yolanda Curas. So thank you so much to all of these comrades. If you'd like to support the show as well and join the independent progressive media revolution, you can do so by going to humanistreport.com/support, patreon.com/humanistreport, or by clicking join underneath any one of our YouTube videos. So we have another fantastic show for you all this week. We'll talk about Trump and how he's officially given up on trying to fight COVID-19, and some of his staffers reportedly hope that Americans will just grow numb to all of the deaths caused by the pandemic. And he's also pressuring governors to adopt his strategy of pretending it's not a thing by forcing schools to reopen in full by fall. Also, his supporters are taking their anti-mask hysteria to a new extreme level. And while we're talking about Republican insanity, we'll examine a right-wing commentator's claim that large, multi-billion-dollar corporations want a communist revolution. Yes, you heard that correctly. And we'll look at Madison Cawthorne, a Republican up-and-comer who the party hopes will draw in young voters. Also, the Dakota Access Pipeline has been killed by a federal judge, at least for now, and we talk about that and celebrate. And Nancy Pelosi is refusing to debate her primary opponent, Shahid Bhattar. I'll tell you what you can do to force her hand there. And finally, we closed the week by talking to comedian Lance from The Serfs about a variety of issues that you will not want to miss. That's what we've got on the agenda for today's episode. Hopefully you will enjoy it. Let's get right to it. So contrary to what Donald Trump wants you to think, COVID-19 cases in the United States are continuing to rise. In fact, on July 3rd, we broke our own record with more than 57,000 new cases in one day. Now, contrast that with other countries who have been struggling to get this under control, like Italy, and on that same day, they only saw 223 new cases. Spain only saw 444 new cases. So it's not like it's eliminated in these other countries, but I mean, clearly, they've been much more effective at getting it under control, and we are very obviously doing worse than the rest of the world. Now, if you ask Donald Trump why that is, it's not necessarily because he bungled it, because he could do no wrong. He's perfect. He's a genius, right? But in his view, the only reason why we're seeing an explosion of cases is because we're doing more testing. In his view, more testing equals more cases. He tweeted out, cases, cases, cases. If we didn't test so much and so successfully, we would have very few cases. If you test 40 million people, you are going to have many cases. Now, this logic is completely idiotic because you can just stop diagnosing people with cancer, for example, and claim that you've cured cancer. But in actuality, that's not how this works. The cases would still be there. We just wouldn't know about it. And raw positive case numbers isn't the only metric that we use to determine how quickly the virus is spreading or how prevalent it is in any given area. So he's just trying to come up with some sort of justification to explain why it's so bad, because as a leader, it makes him look really incompetent because he is incompetent. But as CNBC's Wolf Fuhr explains, to dispel claims that testing is to blame for the country's growing outbreak, epidemiologists point to a figure known as the positivity rate, which indicates the percent of tests that come back positive in a given region. The data point is important because it indicates how broadly the virus is spreading throughout the community. The World Health Organization has previously said that the positivity rate for a country should remain stable at about 5% for 14 days before a country eases restrictions. Some epidemiologists have noted that the fact that the national positivity rate has yet to drop despite increased testing of the population could indicate that the virus is spreading. That states are finding more cases relative to the amount of tests they are conducting provides the strongest rebuttal to the administration's assertion that case numbers are rising because we're getting better at finding cases through increased testing, Jennifer Nuzzo, lead epidemiologist of Johns Hopkins University's COVID-19 Testing Insights Initiative, wrote in an op-ed for the Washington Post. They tell us the opposite, that each of these states needs to do even more testing to find these infections, followed by more rigorous contact tracing and isolation. So obviously, an increase in testing does not explain why we are seeing an explosion of new cases, because we're not just looking at one metric, right? It's more complex than that, in spite of what Trump wants you to believe. But again, this isn't necessarily about him trying to learn more and educate people. This is damage control. That's what this is. And look, if this weren't an election year, he wouldn't even be pretending to care about COVID-19. I mean, we're in an election year, and he could barely pretend publicly that he gives a damn at all. But I mean, this is exactly why he's tanking currently. If you look at Real Clear Politics polling averages, Joe Biden is ahead of him by 8.7 points. And Joe Biden is winning currently at this point in time, not because Joe Biden is an exciting figure or he's coming up with new policies that are exciting young people and making them want to come out and vote. No, it's because he's saying common sense things that we can all see about Donald Trump and how he's bungled his response to COVID-19, something that we could basically have under control had we acted sooner and actually taken it seriously. But we're still not really taking it seriously. So when you see the way that Joe Biden is attacking him, and not necessarily a political way, but just a common sense way, I mean, it's not really that surprising why Joe Biden is ahead. Take a look at what he's been saying about Donald Trump.
As other leaders in other countries took the necessary steps to get the virus under control, Donald Trump failed us.
In a blistering speech in Wilmington, Delaware, the presumptive Democratic presidential nominee blamed Trump, saying the country is hardly better off than it was in March.
How are we in this many months into this and still don't have what we need? You know, the steps you've taken so far haven't gotten the job done, Mr. President. Fix the shortage of PPE for our healthcare workers before you tee off another round of galls.
In contrast to Trump downplaying the need for testing,
we didn't test, we wouldn't have cases.
The former vice president called for an increase and contact tracing. And on masks,
we absolutely need a clear message from the very top of our federal government that everyone needs to wear a mask in public. It's if I have an undiagnosed, I have it. It's to protect you against me. It's to protect other people.
Yeah, I mean, everything that Joe Biden is saying about Donald Trump here is accurate. The extent to which Donald Trump has bungled COVID-19 cannot be overstated. He had this election, I think, on lock, right? He was cruising towards re-election, and had he acted to get this under control in a serious way, I mean, we could move on. We could move past this, and it would basically not hurt him politically. But because he's been such a colossal failure of a leader here, well, this paved the way to Joe Biden taking the lead. And rightfully so. And Joe Biden is putting out attack ads against Donald Trump. And, you know, even though not all of his ads are good, some of them are terrible, things like this are going to land because people want a leader who is going to actually make an attempt at getting us past this pandemic.
You are going to be so proud of your country. We're going to win so much, you may even get tired of winning. And you'll say, please, please, it's too much winning. We can't take it anymore. Mr. President, it's too much. And I'll say, no, it isn't. We have to keep winning. We have to win more. We're going to win more.
Now, that is an ad that shouldn't just embarrass Donald Trump. It should embarrass all Americans. Because when you compare how poorly we're doing with regard to COVID-19 to other developed countries, I mean, our response has been abysmal. I think Kyle Kalinske basically put it best when he said our response to this was akin to the way a failed state would handle a pandemic. It's been non-existent. Not only are you not trying to get it under control, but the response economically to people who are suffering has been laughable. You gave Americans a one-time payment of $1,200. So, I mean, there's so much to critique when it comes to Donald Trump and the way that he's mishandled COVID-19 up until this point, but the election is months away. So if he even was acting as a self-interested individual with any brain cells that still function, he'd at least try now to get it under control before the election. But basically, all he's doing is hoping that it goes away. That's been his response. And if you think that I'm being facetious here, No, he literally is basically just crossing his fingers and hoping that this goes away.
President Trump repeated his claim that the pandemic will soon disappear.
I think that at some point that's going to sort of just disappear, I hope.
You still believe so? Disappear?
Well, I do. Yeah, sure, at some point. And I think we're going to have a vaccine very soon, too.
So basically, his strategy to combat COVID-19 is thoughts and prayers. That's functionally what this looks like, because he's not proposing any real solutions. He's just not. And if you think that I am interpreting what he said there by hoping that it goes away as, a bad faith political actor, I mean, sure, we all hope that it goes away, but you have to take action. He is not going to take action, at least at this point in time. In fact, what he's banking on is the hope that people are just going to become numb to all of the deaths caused by COVID-19. That is literally what they're banking on. Because as Eric Lutz of Vanity Fair reports, Trump's administration is reportedly scrambling to assemble coherent messaging around the president's behavior. According to the Washington Post, Trump's advisors are seeking ways to reframe his response to the coronavirus, even as the president himself largely seeks to avoid the topic because he views it as a political loser. They're sending health officials to swing states, putting doctors on TV in regional markets where the virus is surging, and crafting talking points to convince Americans that, as one senior official told the outlet, they can live with the virus being a threat. Staffers are also reportedly hoping that the country grows numb to the escalating death toll, a state of mind the president seems to have already achieved. So I need you to understand, we are living through a deadly pandemic, one that's so serious that it only occurs once every 100 years, and he's just given up. He's just decided, I'm done with this, as the leader, as the president of the United States, where he's in a position to actually have an influence over this. And because he views this as a political loser, he's just not going to do anything about it. I mean, that's insane. He's just giving up on the pandemic, and he's hoping that we'll all go numb and not consider the fact that on his watch, 130,000 Americans died because of this. I mean, it's astonishing that this is actually happening in America and there's not universal outrage. The fact that he still has supporters in spite of this, it speaks to how bad American political discourse has become, right? But here's the thing. In spite of what he hopes will happen, in spite of the fact that he's banking on people just, not caring about COVID-19 after a while, you can't do that because a virus doesn't care about whether or not there's an election coming up. A virus doesn't care about your political strategy because it already has showed up at Donald Trump's doorstep. When you have Secret Service agents testing positive for COVID-19, when you have former Republican presidential candidates get treated for COVID-19 after attending Trump's rally in Tulsa, where 6 staffers, mind you, tested positive for COVID-19, and when you have Donald Trump's own son's girlfriend, Kimberly Guilfoyle, testing positive for COVID-19, which reportedly, they viewed as a setback for the campaign who's trying to downplay it, you don't have a choice. You can't pretend like it's not a thing. Not wanting to touch this issue because you view it as a political loser isn't an option. And here's the thing, if you truly believe that Americans are dissatisfied with your response to this, you have months to change it, right? You have months to make an impact, to say, I did all of these things, we took these measures, and we helped make this virus, obsolete, basically, or at least got it under control. But he's not trying. He's literally just giving up because it's an election year, and he already fucked up, so he's just going to pretend like it's not a thing. That's the new strategy. I mean, this is unbelievable. This is unreal. It's not like he, doesn't want to at least do the bare minimum to stop Americans from suffering. He's not even putting up this facade that he cares anymore. He's not even pretending. But Donald Trump does care about you if you are an American statue, and he's pledging to make it so anyone who vandalizes or takes down a statue gets a 10-year prison sentence. 10 years. So if you are a human being in the United States with COVID-19, or maybe you don't have it, but you were affected economically and you lost your job and thus your health insurance as a result, Trump is just going to pretend as if that issue isn't really an issue. But if you're a statue in America, then Donald Trump is going to take swift action to make sure that you're protected. I mean, imagine if he cared about American human beings as much as he cared about statues. I mean, I shouldn't even have to say that because you have an interest as someone seeking re-election to at least pretend to care about us. But he's not even doing the bare minimum. He's just checked out. And it's unbelievable that we accept this, right? Americans should be taking to the streets right now and demanding his resignation. That's what we should be doing. That's how poorly he's handled this. That's how badly he's fucked up. The fact that we are just allowing the sitting president to pretend as if COVID-19 is no longer a thing, that is honestly embarrassing. The fact that he has any allies in Washington, the fact that he has any supporters voting for him, that is embarrassing. So, I mean, I don't know what else to say. He is not going to get this under control before the election, and he's just given up trying because he doesn't believe he is able to. So he's just said, fuck it, I'm moving on to the next issues. Statues, burning the flag. It's honestly just, I don't have the words to explain this. Like, we're going to look back at this moment in history, and we're going to be embarrassed that this guy actually did this and we allowed it to happen without everyone universally demanding that he step down immediately. Because 130,000 Americans have died. I mean, we invaded 2 countries because of 9/11, which killed 3,000 Americans. And now 130,000 Americans have died due to a deadly pandemic, and the response has just been meh, and we're all okay with that. I mean, it's unbelievable. So this is why he is going to end up losing. It's because of this. So lately on the program, we've been talking a lot about the necessity of masks because I have become very concerned about the fact that this, for whatever reason, has become a political issue. Because of course it has. To where if you wear a mask or don't wear a mask, you're making a political statement. If you wear a mask, you're a libtard who's being duped by the deep state, or if you don't wear a mask, you're a MAGA chud.
And I'm not doing it because I woke up in a free country.
They're nuts.
So we're going to talk about this anti-mask hysteria because I do find it fascinating, given that we see a new viral video of a Karen rebelling against a mask requirement pop up every day. But this really is something that should concern all of us because we are fighting a very contagious and deadly pandemic. But the first example that I want to show you of anti-mask hysteria comes from a Costco Karen. I think we're on Costco Karen number 8 by now, where she responds in a very American way to being asked to put on a mask to shop at Costco.
All right, you'll have to put your mask on for me to do that. I will not. Well, then come back in another time, okay? Okay. He's going to require the same. If you want to step outside here, I'll have him come meet you outside. You need to do that. That's our policy. I'm sorry. Can I help you guys? I'm with you. We're going to walk outside. No, I'm going to have him come out and see you.
Nothing wrong with it. We have 3 of them yet.
That is a grown-ass woman sitting on the floor of a Costco throwing a temper tantrum like a toddler because she was asked to put on a mask. Now, I wish I could say that that's like the worst example of rebellion against masks that we've seen, but this next video of a Karen in a Target is even worse because she literally is so anti-mask that just the fact that Target had a display of masks that they were selling, well, that's a big enough political statement that she found it personally offensive to her. So she decided to take it down and destroy it, quite literally.
I'm not playing your game. This over. This over. This over.
I am willing to admit that there's probably a sizable portion of the American population who isn't explicitly political in their aversion to masks, right? They're probably apolitical and they just don't want to wear masks because they think it's uncomfortable and they don't have one and they're too lazy to get one. I don't know. But most of the anti-mask vitriol is in fact coming from the MAGA chud crowd. And I'm not just generalizing and saying, oh, well, that lady was acting that way because she was a Trump supporter. She literally admitted that she's a Trump supporter, and not just any MAGA chud, but a level 100 mega chud who is deep into QAnon conspiracy theories.
Did everything that Donald Trump was elected to do. You can read about it on Twitter. You can read about it in the news. All of the deep state politicians, all of that stuff has happened. It's done. Okay. So I was hired to be the QAnon spokesperson.
Melissa, I mean, if you spin around and just put your phone down.
What?
First, okay?
I need you to put your phone down.
Oh my God.
So that's what we're dealing with. These are the people who are driving the anti-mask hysteria in America. And I'm not going to try to, decode her stupidity that we saw there because it's useless. Basically, they are subscribing to this vague, almost abstract idea that if they wear a mask, then they are agreeing to give up their liberty. My body, my choice, apparently. Because if the government requires that you do something, well, then that, by definition, is against freedom. So they're not allowed to require us to wear seatbelts. They're not allowed to tell us to wear clothing in public. So if you want to hang dong in Walmart, that's just freedom. Yeah, it's stupidity. This is a pandemic. Just put on a mask. Nobody likes wearing a mask. It's uncomfortable. It's hot. And if you have glasses, then they fog up your glasses. But it's a pandemic. If you want to be in public, if you want to reopen the economy, then they're essential. Otherwise, we can go back to self-quarantine again. I mean, you can't have it both ways. The people who are saying open up the economy are the same people who are saying, I don't want to wear masks. Well, you don't get to have your cake and eat it too. It's a virus. It doesn't care about your political predispositions. It's a virus that is absolutely ravaging our country. We lost 130,000 Americans because we've just pretended like it's not a thing. So you can't just not wear a mask. And it's not just that people individually are rebelling against masks. Now the anti-mask discourse is evolving, or devolving, I should say, to where it's now much more nefarious. It's not just, like you're part of counterculture and you're edgy to not want to wear a mask. Now, MAGA chuds are shaming people who choose to wear a mask. Now, someone who I thought they loved, Judge Jeanine Pirro on Fox News, America's Karen, actually got a lot of backlash because she posted a photograph of herself wearing a mask in public. Now, even though not all of the responses to this were bad, there were so many dumb fucks who chose to shame her for wearing a mask that this level of political discourse, this level of vitriol is honestly just, it's shocking even for Fox News' audience. So one person responded to her picture saying, "Take it off, Judge. Don't be a sheep. You're better than that." Another person said, "Why? You look ridiculous. You're outside, for fuck's sake." Another person said, "I'm usually with you, but on this, no. You're being duped. The mask is political. Has nothing to do with health." This one got 1,000 likes, by the way. Another person said, "Come on, Judge. Get over the scam already. I would be more impressed with no mask. #fake. #plandemic." This person says, "Take it off, please. You are inhaling your own CO2 at 8,000 ppm within a few minutes. That is toxic. It creates an acidic environment in your body within which errant cell reproduction thrives equals viruses, cancer, fungal, and bacterial infection. Pneumothorax is also possible." Now, this person sounds like an expert based on all of the words he was using. Very big words here, bigly. I hope that he gets this information to surgeons who have to wear masks every single day. But maybe I'm just not privy to the number of surgeons dropping dead because of masks. Another person says, another example of Fox News assimilating into the MSM. What a disgrace. Yeah, as if they weren't already mainstream media. No masks. Sad you've fallen for this BS. Just don't. I cannot believe you are wearing their muzzle. I guess you are all talk on your show. I am so disappointed in you. And finally, this makes me sad, Jeanine. Fox is dead. When I see this, I'm like pre-mourning the death of humanity, because if we can't do something as simple as wear a mask during a pandemic, how are we going to be able to respond intelligently to bigger crises like climate change? What if there was like an asteroid that was coming to Earth and we had like a year to take action? I feel like I'm reciting the plot of Deep Impact or something, but I mean, what if that were the case? Would there be asteroid deniers? I mean, we can't make it with this level of delusion. And there's a lot more examples of that Travis Getty's of Raw story cataloged. But I mean, at this point, the issue is truly devolving. And it's so serious to them. Like, they take this so seriously that one MAGA chud in Pennsylvania that Status Quo's Jordan Sheridan interviewed literally equated wearing masks, the mandate to wear masks, with the Holocaust. I wish I were kidding, but this is something that happened.
I think it's unconstitutional to even mandate anybody wearing a mask. That'd be like me asking you to put a yellow star on if you were Jewish. It's not right. So if I don't wear a mask, I mean, that's my constitutional right.
Even if it endangers other people?
I mean, if you're afraid of getting it, wear a mask. I'm not afraid of getting it.
No, but I'm saying, even if you were around other people, you're not wearing it, it might be your constitutional right, but even if you could jeopardize others if you have it without knowing it.
It'd be like putting a fence up and saying, well, we're trying to stop mosquitoes with a chain link fence. I mean, it doesn't seem like it's preventing anything. It'd be like me asking you to put a yellow star on if you were Jewish. Oh my God, we're all gonna die.
Look, he literally said mandating that people wear masks is like telling you to put on a yellow star if you're Jewish. I don't have the energy. I don't have the patience for this. All I know is it needs to stop. This is not acceptable. We are in a pandemic. I mean, for fuck's sake, people. Now, because most of this type of rhetoric is coming from MAGA chuds, the only thing that can actually stop them from believing this is if the chief chud himself actually comes out and says masks are okay. Not only that, I denounce people who are against masks. He has to set an example and wear masks in public. Now, previously, he refused to be filmed or photographed wearing a mask, although he did reluctantly wear one when he toured a Ford plant. But he's still not doing enough. I mean, you can actually take policy action here. You can sign an executive order that requires people in federal buildings to wear masks. They're doing this now in federal courts, I believe. But you have to actually do something, even if it's small. But you have to make a statement, a policy statement, where you encourage people to wear masks and you unequivocally reject the people who are speaking out against masks because you're president, right? So the buck stops with you. These are people who basically worship you. You have to do better. Send a message to your conspiratorial supporters, make them wear masks, but he's not doing that. And as CNN reports, as coronavirus cases surge and governors begin agitating for a national mandate on wearing masks, President Donald Trump is showing few signs he'll budge on an issue that has come to epitomize a national pandemic response rooted in denial and which now threatens his political future. Even most elected Republicans now openly advocate for wearing masks and have been pictured with their noses and mouths covered, in part to set an example for the country. But Trump still refuses to wear a mask in public, and most guests at his 2 July 4th celebrations at Mount Rushmore and on the White House South Lawn were barefaced. So there's that. And when it comes to the rhetoric that he's using, he's not necessarily like explicitly anti-mask, but what he's saying is not enough.
I'm all for masks. I think masks are good. I would wear, if I were in a group of people and I was close.
You would wear one?
Oh, I would. Oh, I have. I mean, people have seen me wearing one. If I'm in a group of people where we're not, 10 feet away, but usually I'm not in that position, and everyone's tested. Because I'm the president, they get tested before they see me. But if I were in a tight situation with people, I would absolutely.
You think the public will see that at some point?
I mean, I'd have no problem. Actually, I had a mask on. I sort of liked the way I looked. Okay, I thought it was okay. It was a dark black mask, and I thought it looked okay. It looked like the Lone Ranger.
That's a start. We're, trending in the correct direction, but that's not going far enough. You're not saying enough. You need to be unequivocal. You need to be clear and decisive. You need to say, not only should everyone wear a mask, but people who do not wear a mask are putting all of us in danger. And if you care about me getting reelected, then we have to beat this virus before November. So let's all make sure that we wear a mask and we stop the spread of COVID-19 before we end up allowing Sleepy Joe Biden to win. Hell, if he chose to sell MAGA masks, that'd be fine, as long as you're encouraging people to wear it. Even if he came up with some other alternative conspiracy theory that wearing a mask protects people from chemtrails to kind of like reverse engineer a conspiracy theory against them, I don't even care at this point. Like, that's how serious the situation is. The ends justify the means, so long as later on he says that chemtrails, that's not a real conspiracy. But I mean, we just have to take action to make sure that these people are putting on masks, because these people are not taking it seriously, and as a result, putting all of us at risk. So it's one thing to have a president that has bungled the response and is just basically pretending like it's not a thing, but it's another thing to have his supporters actually not just refuse to wear masks, but now go so far as to shame people who choose to do the logical thing in wearing a mask during a pandemic. So it has to stop. and it doesn't seem like it will soon. Hopefully it gets better. But I mean, the buck stops with Trump. He's the leader. They worship him. They would, inhale his farce if he sold it in bottles. So he's got to act. He can stop this by controlling his conspiratorial, loony, MAGA chud supporters. But will he do that sufficiently? I don't know. I mean, he's not anti-mask based on what he's saying now. But unless he's unequivocal about it, I don't think much is going to change, honestly. All right, so I know that I'm late to the party in talking about this, but I couldn't pass up an opportunity to share news that's this good with you. For all intents and purposes, the Dakota Access Pipeline will be dead in 30 days, pending review. This is honestly such good news that it's difficult for me to process this, because this is something that activists and the Standing Rock Sioux Tribe have been fighting against literally for years. And the fact that this is happening is honestly shocking to me. So let's get to the details here. J.C. Fortin and Lisa Friedman of the New York Times report the Dakota Access Pipeline, an oil route from North Dakota to Illinois that has inspired intense protests and legal battles, must shut down pending an environmental review and be emptied of oil by August 5th, a district court ruled on Monday. The decision, which could be subject to appeal, is a victory for the Standing Rock Sioux Tribe and other Native American and environmental groups who have fought the project for years, and a significant defeat for President Trump, who has sought to keep the Dakota Access Pipeline alive. Today is a historic day for the Standing Rock Sioux Tribe and many people who have supported us in the fight against the pipeline, Mike Faith, the chairman of the Standing Rock Sioux Tribe, said in a statement. This pipeline should have never been built here, he added. We told them that from the beginning. The ruling by Judge James E. Boasberg of the U.S. District Court for the District of Columbia is the latest twist in a long-running legal battle. It essentially vacates a federal permit that had allowed the pipeline to operate, while the United States Army Corps of Engineers, which had granted the permits for the pipeline, conducted an extensive environmental impact review. Energy Transfer, the Texas company that owns the pipeline, said in a statement on Monday that it would file a motion to stay the decision, and if that failed, appeal to a higher court. We will be immediately pursuing all available legal and administrative processes and are confident that once the law and full record are fully considered, Dakota Access Pipeline will not be shut down and that oil will continue to flow, it said. In his opinion, Judge Boasberg wrote that the court was mindful of the disruption such a shutdown will cause, but that it had to consider the potential harm each day the pipeline operates. So there's a lot to process here, but I will say that this news comes just after we learned that the Atlantic Coast Pipeline, which is being developed by Duke Energy and Dominion Energy, have also announced that they're canceling their project as well. So, I mean, it's really great news all around for the environment. But I will say, I'll be honest here, not to rain on everyone's parade, I'm a little bit skeptical that this will stand. This will be appealed, and whether or not, a court at a higher level will maintain the same stance, it's yet to be seen. But I'm cautiously optimistic. I will say this is an unexpected victory for us, but, just kind of like pump the brakes on the celebration, even though it's hard not to celebrate any good news because it's very rare during these times. But I mean, this is something that is near and dear to my heart. We talked about the Dakota Access Pipeline so much that I actually have a playlist on this channel dedicated to talking about the Dakota Access Pipeline. And, the story is truly, it really shows how badly affairs are in the United States, right? When we're talking about militarized police brutalizing protesters, this story has all of those components. Literal armed mercenaries were paid to intimidate and assault peaceful protesters. They had dogs sicked on them. They had cold water sprayed on them in freezing weather, all to defend this pipeline that shouldn't have been built there because it violates the territorial sovereignty of the Standing Rock Sioux Tribe, and also it poses a threat to their drinking water and drinking water of anyone in the surrounding areas. And at the same time that this was happening, they got no support from Obama, who was a lame duck president at the time, and he basically just said, you know what, I'm going to wait and not do anything. We'll just see how this plays out. And then he left, and as soon as Trump took office, he signed an executive order almost immediately expediting the construction process of the pipeline. And not to mention, there was never a proper environmental impact report conducted before they constructed the pipeline. have already been leaks. Like what we see, there have been multiple leaks within months of it going up. So everything that the protesters said would happen has come to fruition. So, to see it come to this place where ending it permanently is seriously on the table. I mean, this is huge news. This is great for Standing Rock Sioux as well as environmental activists. Like, this is a win for the planet. We'll just put it that way. And we have two pipelines being shut down in the same week. This is absolutely huge, so I'm really thankful that we got this decision, but I will say to everyone, just be cautiously optimistic because Energy Transfer Partners, they have the support of the president. This is a company who has a lot of money and resources, and they're going to fight this tooth and nail. They've had legal setbacks before, but they've kind of gone on in spite of that. So, I mean, look, I'm cautiously optimistic, but this is really, really good news. Congrats to Standing Rock Sioux and any protester and water protector who put their lives on the line to stop this from happening, because it paid off now. So as most of you hopefully know by now, Shahid Buttar, Nancy Pelosi's primary opponent, has advanced to the general election in November. So California has a top two primary system to where Democrats and Republicans all basically compete in the same open primary, and the top two candidates with the highest vote totals advance to the general election. Shahid Buttar is facing off against Nancy Pelosi, and I will admit, this is going to be a really tough race to beat, but is it impossible? No, I don't think it's impossible. But still, even though she has one of the most serious primary challenges she's had in decades, she's not taking it seriously. And this isn't necessarily something that is uncommon. Usually, if a Democrat incumbent is facing a primary challenger who's actually really strong, they choose to not debate them or even acknowledge their existence unless their internal polls show that they're kind of in trouble. It's why Joe Crowley back in 2018 finally chose to acknowledge Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's existence and debate her, because the numbers didn't look too good for him and it scared him. And Nancy Pelosi currently is in the phase of this campaign where she just pretends like he doesn't exist. But regardless if her internal poll numbers show her beating him or not, it shouldn't matter. Like, if you are facing a primary challenge, you have to debate your primary opponent, right? AOC absolutely destroyed her primary opponent, but she still debated her, because that's what you have to do in a democracy, right? You're not entitled to your seat in Congress. You have to allow your constituents to hear alternative voices. I don't care if it's someone who I support or not. I mean, Ro Khanna, AOC, Ilhan Omar, Bernie Sanders, if you have a primary opponent, you should be required to at least debate them 3 times. But that's not what we get. You have to basically twist their arms to get them to agree to a debate. And the fact that we even have to do this in a democracy is infuriating, but here we are. Now, Shahid Buttar is trying to get Nancy Pelosi to agree to a debate, and he tweeted out, "San Francisco deserves real representation in Congress. At the very least, Nancy Pelosi should show up for a debate. It's been 30 years since her last one." And he also links to a Sprout petition that you can sign. It has over 2,000 signatures where you can kind of maybe put a little bit of pressure on Nancy Pelosi to debate. But again, I will say that it's preposterous that we have to do this to incumbents, right? There needs to be some type of requirement or law to where if you're facing a primary opponent that reaches a certain threshold, if they're a serious challenge to you, then you have to debate them, especially in these top 2 primary states. There's no excuse. In Washington State, in California, if you have a top 2 primary system and one of 2 candidates will win in a general election, they should be required to debate. It doesn't matter if it's 2 Democrats or a Democrat versus a Republican. A debate should be mandatory. It shouldn't be based on whether or not an incumbent will agree to it, because that's absurd. That's not democratic. So I would encourage you to sign that petition. I think that petitions can be useful, but more importantly, you have to tweet to Nancy Pelosi, call her office, actually put real pressure on her, because if she has an option to just ignore Shahid Buttar, then she will. So the point is, we have to do what we can to help Shahid Buttar. I mean, this is going to be a hard race, but it's worthwhile because Shahid is a phenomenal candidate. Putting Nancy Pelosi aside, Shahid Buttar alone is someone who we desperately need in Congress, because unlike a lot of the elites like Nancy Pelosi who you see in Congress, he's a normal person. He's a normal person who has dealt with struggle, right? Who has actually faced adversity in life and wasn't handed everything with a silver spoon. And to kind of show you that, he put out an ad in March, which really speaks to the world of difference that we see between him and Nancy Pelosi. Nancy Pelosi is someone who has 2 $12,000 refrigerators stocked full of ice cream in her home, in her mansion, one of many mansions, I'm assuming, whereas Shahid Bhattar actually had to fight for every single thing that he has. So take a look at this ad, and we'll talk a little bit more about him when we come back.
If you've always had a roof over your head and you know it's going to be there, it's really, frankly, I think impossible to relate to people who've had to be exposed to the elements. Just the struggle not to be exposed to the rain, the cold, sleet, what have you. That in itself is an all-consuming endeavor. I thankfully haven't had to deal with that for large chunks of my life. When I was 17 to 19, I had a taste of it, and I know that that's, I wouldn't wish that experience on anybody. I thought everything was fine until I was 16 and my parents informed me we were losing the home to foreclosure. It felt like my world crumbling. It was losing my friends because I wouldn't be around them anymore. It was losing the place that I knew. It was putting all of my worldly belongings in boxes and frankly losing most of them. I still wonder occasionally about my high school yearbooks and whatever happened to them. It also was the beginning of what for me became having to leave college the first time.
Smile, Shahid. I'm just taking pictures of your school.
I had all the student aid that I could get because my parents had lost their house and weren't able to really contribute anything. I couldn't make the expected contribution for the fall semester. The first message from the university was, don't worry about it, we'll figure it out.
But I love you. I want you desperately in school.
By the middle of the semester, it was, okay, this isn't going to work. But by that point, I'd been in the dorms for half the semester, so I ended up on the hook to the University of Chicago for $10,000 on top of my student loans as I was losing that place to live. I have friends that I'm very grateful for sheltering me from the most brutal aspects of being unhoused. I only really a couple times was outside, but mostly, I had a roof over my head. I got a couple friends in the dorms who had let me in. I stayed on people's couches. This one particular night, I couldn't get in. I do remember there's snow on the ground. I wasn't quite dressed for it. I had a coat, but it's not like, I definitely wasn't like layered up to be out all night, And I spent that night basically on buses. It gave me opportunities to understand what desperation is like and what people go through. I see here in San Francisco people grapple with being unhoused, and having inhabited very briefly that experience, I know how quickly it could crack someone's psyche. I lost my hope as a young person on the south side of Chicago, and frankly, I think of it as a stroke of remarkable fortune that I was able to get back into a position where I could be not only secure with a roof over my head, but secure with job opportunities, learning opportunities. I think that in the past, there's been this presumption in the United States that if you're unhoused or if you're unsuccessful, somehow it's your fault. That's never been true, and it's particularly untrue as wealth gets siphoned up to the 0.1%. More and more Americans are in a position where even if they have a roof over their head, they're not sure if it's going to stay there. They're not sure how to keep it. We have plenty of housing for everybody, and the fact that we let apartments go empty so that they aren't available for people to live in, I think that that's just a foolish choice. In my mind, making sure that everybody has housing isn't just serving the people who are unhoused. It isn't just serving the people who are housing insecure. It serves our communities because it means that our communities and our country can benefit from all of the contributions that everyone has to offer. And the idea that we have made housing such a market-driven commodity instead of a human right is just a reflection of our mislaid priorities as a society. It's one of the things I want to help correct.
That is a powerful ad, and Shahid Bhattar is a phenomenal candidate. Now, what I usually say is in these types of races, I think that the insurgent lefty candidate is going to win so long as enough people hear about him or her. But in this instance, I think that name recognition is important. But Nancy Pelosi almost has this cult of personality around her where you have these resistance liberals just so infatuated with her because they think that she's effective at, fighting against Donald Trump's agenda when she's not at all. Clapping at Donald Trump sarcastically or tearing up his speech or whatever, that is not something that actually affects meaningful change. Actually allowing progressive policies to be voted on, challenging him in a meaningful way, it's more than like this type of political theater that amounts to nothing. And you have to try to break the hold and break this type of trance that centrists are in, this infatuation that they have with establishment Democrats. So even if people know about the option in Shahid Bhattar, I still think a lot of them would opt for Nancy Pelosi specifically because they kind of worship her and see her as the anti-lefty, anti-progressive who's just, holding the center because that's what she said she has to do. So this race, I think, requires an extra effort to the left. That's the point. Not to discourage you. That's not why I'm bringing this up. But it requires us to go beyond like the traditional primary race where we can't just, phone bank and, canvas for Shahid Bhattar, even though that's crucial, but we actually have to do a little bit more to change hearts and minds, because anytime you're going after this type of political behemoth like Nancy Pelosi or Joe Crowley, it requires a lot, and having extended conversations with people in that district who will be casting a vote in November, that is absolutely crucial. So if you live in that district, you have to get out and do everything in your power to elect Shahid Bhattar. And those of us who don't live in that district, we could still phone bank, but we have to donate to Shahid Bhattar and support efforts like this where we sign petitions and spread the word about what he's trying to do, because this is a really difficult race to achieve. And if we're going to be successful, which is possible, we have to fight like we've never fought before, fight harder than we fought for Bernie Sanders. So, that's all I'll say. She's got to debate him, and I think that the more pressure that we put on her, the better off we'll be at ousting her, the better and more stronger a candidate Shahid Bhattar will be if he knows that we have his back. So I'll leave that there. This is an important race, and we have to watch everything that is happening here and try to bolster the message that Shahid is trying to get across. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with an individual named Madison Cawthorne, but what he managed to accomplish recently, it's genuinely impressive, and even if I disagree with him politically, I give him credit where it's due. He beat a Trump-endorsed establishment Republican, and he is poised to become the youngest member of Congress. He's going to be the first Zoomer, I believe, elected to Congress, which really is interesting, although it is a little bit depressing that it's not a lefty who is the first Zoomer, but nonetheless, what he did, you've got to give him credit where it's due. I was not, able to run for Congress when I was 24 years old. I was still working at a Blockbuster, believe it or not, trying to study for the GRE to get into grad school. So, I wasn't there, right? Maybe there's a little bit of class privilege, but nonetheless, you can't take away what he managed to accomplish. And his story actually is really unique in that he was in a car crash that left him paralyzed from the waist down. So he is in a wheelchair. Hopefully that gives him some additional insight into, the needs of people with disabilities. And he doesn't seem like an overt fascist. However, I want to just kind of temper everyone's expectations, because I think that a lot of the media is already fawning over him because they think that maybe this is the first type of Republican that we'll see in the post-Trump era if we're able to oust Trump in November. And, people are thinking, oh, well, maybe there's a possibility that Republicans can still be normal and not complete far-right goons like Donald Trump or Louis Gohmert. But that's not necessarily the case, because as you learn more about Madison Cawthorne, it becomes obvious that there's not really much difference here. It's the same exact antiquated ways of thinking, and, it's just all of the same that we've come to expect with the Republican Party, albeit in a Zoomer package. And part of the reason why I think I'm a little bit salty is because the media is fawning over him when they never do this for left-wing candidates. Like, how much have we heard about Jamal Bowman or Mondaire Jones or Qasim Rashid? But when it comes to a Republican, since the media wants to try to pretend as if they're neutral and be overly fair to Republicans to correct what a lot of people view as a liberal bias, they're trying to, present him to Americans as, a new type of Republican, when that's not really what this is. But we'll get to that. I just want to show you the reaction that he got from The View, which is supposed to be a liberal show, which includes conservatives, and we'll contrast the way that they responded to him with the way that they responded to AOC being sworn in 2019.
What do you think you did that made people recognize that you were the better choice?
I'm just enamored by young people that get involved in the political process. So kudos to you for running at this age. I think that's incredible.
At just 25 years old, the youngest person in Congress is the infamous Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and you two couldn't be more different.
So they seem genuinely excited to talk about him, but here's how they talked about AOC.
And you just got in there, and I know you got lots of good ideas, but I would encourage you to sit still for a minute and learn the job. And
so do you understand why the media is a problem here? They haven't even brought on Jamal Bowman or Mondaire Jones or Qasim Rashid, and, they need to be lifting up all types of voices. You hear no lefties in the media, but the minute there's a Republican who is young, who is able to string together a coherent sentence, who doesn't seem too much like an extremist like Donald Trump, well, the media just falls over themselves to prop up this individual. So, that's a different story for a different day, but I want to talk about this individual because, as I mentioned, he was in a car accident that left him paralyzed. So, something about him that you would hope is that he has more empathy, and it seems as if he actually is more empathetic, in contrast with other Republicans who are ruthless, who just tell everyone basically you're on your own. The government's not going to help you with anything. So if you lose your job, if you have medical bills, rugged individualism for you. We only offer socialism to the rich. So here's what he had to say about what that accident, did to him in terms of his outlook on life and how to treat people.
It changed my whole perspective quite a bit. It taught me a level of grit and perseverance that would have taken probably decades to learn otherwise. But also it taught me something that I think is lacking a lot on the Republican side in politics, and that's empathy. It's being able to feel like I can recognize when people feel disenfranchised or when they don't feel like the system represents them. And so I know what that's like, and I can empathize with that.
Look, I think that that's really admirable. I don't necessarily know what that means in particular, but having empathy is a good thing. Does that mean that, he supports trans rights? I don't know. But when it comes to something that's relatable to him, which is healthcare, because when he got in his accident, he had a medical bill of $3 million. So, I would assume that based on that experience, you would want to make sure that nobody else in the country would have to deal with that. Except when it comes to healthcare, he doesn't actually take that position.
The accident left you with $3 million in medical debt, which is why you plan to make healthcare reform one of your signature issues. And I think that's extremely admirable. You are against free healthcare for all. So I want to understand what is your plan, especially since we are seeing 20 million people quit be out of work due to COVID-19. So I'm assuming your healthcare plan has nothing to do with employer-related insurance.
No, Sonny, it does not. I thank you very much for your question. But the thing that I think is so imperative to realize is that if I was in a country that practiced socialized medicine, I genuinely believe I would be dead today. At that point, whenever you're using a single payer, a free base market of healthcare that gives healthcare to all, you obviously have to start rationing care. And I only had about a 1% chance to live. It was an absolute miracle that I was able to pull through. I thank my doctors, I thank my God. But I know that without having a great healthcare system, I would not be here today. And so my answer, though, is that for too long the Republicans have been the party of no when it comes to healthcare reform. Whereas I really believe that we should be leading the pathway to lower prices so more Americans can have access to it. And I think the way to do that is to decrease regulation. Because, here in North Carolina, Blue Cross Blue Shield has a virtual monopoly on the entire state, and that creates artificially high prices. But I think if we could bring in some more insurance company and bring more competition and price transparency to the entire industry, we could see prices go significantly far lower. I mean, there's 6 people trying to sell a pizza to my house right now that will deliver to my house, and they're all trying to get a pizza to me, for as cheap as it can be, as fast as they can, and with the best taste. And, I think it's an extremely simplified analogy, but I think it's very imperative to realize that free market capitalism works and it always lowers prices.
I love that. Totally agree.
Shut up, Meghan McCain. Unblock me on Twitter, you goddamn coward. But putting that aside, if free market capitalism were the answer to all of our healthcare woes, we have the most free market healthcare system in the developed world. So wouldn't it suffice as it is? Wouldn't it not need to be reformed any further? And some of the things that he says here are genuinely stupid, and I'm really trying here to not be a dick and shit on him too much. But let's look at what he says. If I was in a country that practiced socialized medicine, I genuinely believe I'd be dead today. What? This is your moderate, normal Republican America? He thinks he'd be dead if he were in a socialized medicine country? First of all, when we're talking specifically about single-payer healthcare, which is what he cited, we're not talking about socialized medicine. We're talking about socialized insurance. I wish we were having a more serious conversation about a national healthcare system like the UK has, but we're not even taking it that far. We're talking about socialized insurance. We send the bills that your private hospital gives you to the government and they pay for it, Medicare specifically. But the reason why he believes he would be dead is because if everyone had healthcare, which would be such a horrible thing, then we'd have to ration care. So the assumption is that if everyone has healthcare, that would, lead to more wait times. So if he, came into the emergency room with an accident, they'd basically just say, well, we can't help you right now. I'm so sorry. You may be in critical condition, but this person has a cold, so they were in line first. Like, that's not the way that things work. And if it were the way that a single-payer system functions, don't you think we'd be seeing a lot of cases like this in countries with single-payer, like Canada, for example? I mean, they're just north of the border. We don't hear about that happening, right? What he also says is that the way we can improve our current system, because it does need improving, at least he admits that, is to decrease regulation. So in other words, impose less rules on these greedy for-profit private companies who have a fiduciary responsibility to increase shareholder value and not actually cure patients. I mean, Goldman Sachs asked literally whether or not it was a sustainable business model to cure patients. But according to him, the way that we improve the healthcare industry is to just unchain them, let their greed go unrestrained. How would that solve the problems of our health system? Don't you think that it needs more regulation? Don't you think that it's a good thing that we impose regulations and don't allow them to discriminate against patients with pre-existing conditions? How would deregulating an already rogue industry who buys politicians be the answer? And he also suggests that if there's more transparency required, which is a regulation, by the way, he says he wants to deregulate, but he also wants price transparency, which is a regulation, then if, these types of health insurance companies are forced to disclose their prices, they're going to be so embarrassed that they're not going to want to charge you an arm and a leg. Except the thing with this is they're just going to rip you off and be more open about it. It's not going to actually deter them from charging you thousands of dollars because they care more about profit than anything. And, if we have increased competition, I mean, in theory, that should be conducive to better prices for the consumer, right? But what's going to happen is they're going to work together to covertly price fix, because that's exactly what we're seeing now. So, I mean, all of the solutions that he is proposing, on one hand, he says he's against regulation, but he proposes regulations. But on another hand, the regulations that he is proposing are the most milquetoast, mealy-mouthed solutions that won't actually fix anything. His thinking when it comes to, at least the policy of healthcare is right in lockstep with the Republican Party establishment. But at the same time, he's definitely not positioning himself as an establishment politician who wants Democrats and Republicans to hold hands and sing Kumbaya, even if he implies that that's what he wants sometimes, because he very directly is criticizing the establishment in general, not just establishment Democrats, but establishment Republicans as well. And even if his, criticism is relatively vague of the establishment, he definitely doesn't want to be seen as someone who is establishment.
Whether you're talking about the Democratic side or the Republican side, I believe we have a lot of cowardly establishment hacks who really just try to toe their party line. They don't want to shake anything up in any real way. And, I almost look at them kind of like how, a lot of people see big healthcare. They don't necessarily want to fix the problems because then they're going to lose a lot of their clientele, or in this case, lose their talking points. So I want to go to Washington, D.C. for some different reasons, not to enrich myself, not to empower myself, but to actually be a voice for the people of the United States, because I feel like we don't have that represented in Washington, D.C. right now.
Now, believe it or not, he was answering the question, what would he get done when he's elected in Congress, if he's elected, assuming he will be successful there, which he probably will. And he offered zero policy prescriptions, and he almost made a good point. Like, he was this close when he was talking about healthcare. So he says he looks at establishment politicians the way people see big healthcare. They don't necessarily want to fix the problem because they're going to lose a lot of their clientele. Or, in the case of politicians, they don't want to fix the problems because they'll lose their talking points. Oh my God, you were so close. You were so close. You almost nailed it. Why don't these healthcare companies want to fix the healthcare problems? Well, because they don't want to lose their clientele. He's right. But why do they want to keep their clientele? What do the clientele do for these companies? They make them money, right? So politicians don't actually want to fix problems because they are making their donors money, okay? Politicians don't give a flying fuck about talking points. If they lose their talking points, they just craft new ones a week later. It all comes down to money. It's about capital, right? The reason why they don't want to fix the problems is because they're all corrupt. Not just Republicans, not just Democrats, all of them. Most people in Congress are corrupt. They do the bidding of their donors, right? There's a Princeton University study that proves this, that, the interests, the policy preferences with regard to policy outcomes are reflected of elites and special interests, but average Americans have a statistically insignificant impact on policy outcomes. So it's about capital. It's about the money, stupid. And he was so close to making a really good point. He is close to actually hitting it on the head, but at the same time, he's not, right? Like, he is someone who I think that people would like because, again, he's a normal Republican seemingly, and he's articulate, but he's not actually making any valid points, and he's out of step with his generation. So it doesn't necessarily matter that he's going to be the first Zoomer elected to Congress if he's not bringing in any new ideas, right? We care about young people getting elected because they bring in a fresh perspective, but what he's bringing is more of the same. And Crystal Ball asked him, as a Zoomer, how is he actually going to represent Zoomers when they don't agree with any of the policies that he's proposing? This is what he had to say.
Polling suggests that my generation is overwhelmingly left-leaning, but I believe that the problem with it is with the fault lies with the Republican Party. For so long, they've just had a poor messaging stance, and we've chosen these social issue hills to die on, which I think has really created an alienation of who would be Republicans, whereas the majority of my generation is filing undecided or unaffiliated. They don't think that the Democratic Party necessarily represents them, and they definitely don't think the Republican Party represents them. And so, I believe that if we come out with a limited government approach, which is the true cause of conservatism, one that says, hey, I want the government to get out of your life, I want fiscal responsibility, I want strong border protection, and I want a strong military, I think a lot of our generation can get behind that. Let's get the government out of these social issues and social squabbles where they don't belong, and let's let state governments handle that individually. But as from a federal perspective, let's just focus on keeping people safe and building the framework for people to be able to thrive in their work and in their private lives.
Here's why he's wrong, and this is definitely not going to attract millennials or Zoomers because he's not addressing the root causes. So in a late-stage capitalist society, what are the implications of someone saying that I want to get the big government out of our lives? It means that you are adopting this alternative mode of governance. You want to get big government out, but you're going to shift the burden of governance to the free market, which means rather than having, the big government lord over us, it's going to be large multinational corporations who control our lives. And you're basically opening the door to, even more capitalism, which is the very system that has devastated millennials and Zoomers. So if you don't actually right the economic wrongs created by capitalism, you're not going to pull them into your party. It's not going to attract them at all. What he's basically pitching here is libertarianism. This is not innovative. This is not a new ideology. And another thing he said about securing our borders, that is a xenophobic dog whistle. On top of that, he's actually hiding his social conservatism because he pitches to us, let's get the government out of these social issues and social squabbles where they don't belong, and let's let state governments handle that individually. There it is right there. There's the social conservatism that he was trying to hide, because when you say, let's get the federal government out of social issues and let the states deal with it, what that means is that if Alabama wants to discriminate against transgender people, well, we're not going to step in and get involved. If, certain states want to ban same-sex couples from getting married, well, that's up to the government. And this is the same thing that libertarians have been saying forever. Back in 2015, Rand Paul was talking about how we need to get the federal government out of marriage entirely. And that was supposedly like the woke position to take, when in actuality, it's not woke. You're just kind of sidestepping the issue entirely because you can't get the federal government government out of a lot of these social issues. You can't. Like when it comes to marriage, the federal government offers couples hundreds of benefits, for example. So, I mean, the federal government is inextricably linked here. So by saying that, you're basically sitting on the fence and pretending to be woke when in actuality, you're just turning a blind eye to the bigotry that takes place in states at the state level. And it is a way to mask your social conservatism. This is what libertarians do. This is why it's not persuasive and it won't actually appeal to Zoomers and millennials. So at first, when you hear from Madison Cawthorne, he sounds like a traditional, standard establishment Republican, but then he starts sounding essentially like a libertarian who's fiscally conservative but socially liberal. But then when you go to his website, that's not necessarily the case either, because, he is supposed to be a libertarian, but he says protect the unborn. Now, that's not necessarily bad at face value. It could mean that he wants the U.S. government to stop bombing babies in the Middle East and North Africa, or it could mean that he simply supports healthcare for pregnant women and babies. But then just to the right of that, he opposes socialized medicine, and he is also very proudly pro-Trump. So he's kind of a libertarian, but not really a libertarian because he's anti-abortion, but he's kind of like, a progressive, woke Republican, although not really, because he supports our explicitly racist president, Donald Trump. So, I mean, if he were to take the political compass test, this is what it would look like. And the reason why his political ideology is seemingly incoherent is because he wants to be everything at once, and there's really no nuance here. And, you can tell how confused he is because he rails against the establishment, but yet he puts AOC and Pelosi in the same category. And on his website, it states, our faith, our freedoms, and our values are under assault from leftist coastal elites like Nancy Pelosi and AOC. I will work tirelessly for smaller, leaner government, and I will be a strong voice for faith, family, and freedom. Yeah, so if you're putting Nancy Pelosi and AOC in the same category, you're not anti-establishment. You know nothing about how the establishment has failed because Nancy Pelosi is very explicitly establishment and AOC is anti-establishment. So, I mean, what we're getting here is the same exact Republican mentality, but in a newer, younger package. And, don't take it from me. Don't let me convince you that he's more of the same. Take it from him because he very much explicitly supports old school conservative ideas.
I think what we need to do is really just follow the conservative doctrine of slashing regulation and getting rid of a lot of taxes.
So don't be fooled by him. As the great Marianne Williamson once said at a debate, just because you have a new body doesn't necessarily mean that you're not going to have old ideas. And that's exactly what we're seeing from Madison Cawthorne. It is still shocking to me that we have a president who is just pretending like the pandemic is over. It's no longer an issue because to him, he doesn't feel as if he can redeem himself. He already bungled COVID-19, so why even try going forward? It's a political loser, so he's just not going to touch it. In fact, his staffers are reportedly literally hoping that Americans grow quote-unquote numb to COVID-19 deaths. That's where we're at. So he is living in this alternative reality because, it's better for him politically. But it's not just that he's living in his own reality. He's forcing his delusions on all of us because he's forcing us as well to pretend as if the pandemic is over and to pretend as if it doesn't exist and it's not really a thing. And the way he's doing this is by forcing governors to resume schooling as usual and not have any differences in the curriculum, pretend as if the pandemic isn't actually a thing. This is the hill he wants to die on. So as the Hill's Brett Samuels and Jesse Hellman report, President Trump on Tuesday said the White House would put pressure on governors to get schools open in the fall amid rising coronavirus cases in the United States. At a White House summit, Trump signaled the full court press, saying it would not be good politically to keep schools closed. We don't want people to make political statements or do it for political reasons. They think it's going to be good for them politically, so they keep the schools closed. No way, Trump said during a White House event with government officials and school administrators. We're very much going to put pressure on governors and everyone else to open the schools, Trump added, after again claiming that the increase in cases is a result of increased testing. So he is using the same excuse. The reason why it only seems like we're doing worse than other developed countries is because we're doing more testing. Again, that is not persuasive. Nobody actually who's serious believes that. Now, sometimes Donald Trump will say something really stupid or ask a really stupid question, and he'll be like the lone idiot in his administration, and, people around him, smarter people, will try to convince him to not do the completely idiotic thing. For example, he wanted to reopen the country by Easter. He asked why we're not nuking hurricanes to stop them. He asked why we can't just allow COVID-19 to wash over America. Apparently that is his thing now that he's doing. But I mean, sometimes he will receive pushback from the people who are closest to him, but not this time because they have his back. The Education Secretary as well as the HHS Secretary are all on board with what he's trying to do. Because as Politico's Nicole Gadiano explains, Education Secretary Betsy DeVos on Tuesday lashed out at school districts that haven't promised to fully reopen their schools this fall, blasting education leaders who won't accept risk and give up and didn't try to launch summer instruction. During a call with governors, she slammed the Fairfax district for its distance learning disaster in the spring and offering a choice of only 0 or 2 days of in-person instruction moving forward, according to notes of a call with governors obtained by Politico. Earlier in the pandemic, DeVos had been more open to kids learning both online and during in-person classes. Education leaders need to examine real data and weigh risk. Risk is involved in everything we do, from learning to ride a bike to riding a rocket into space and everything in between, she said. HHS Secretary Alex Azar separately backed up DeVos, saying parents should expect schools to deliver a safe learning environment for their children, even during a pandemic. So, according to Betsy DeVos, learning to ride a bike, going to school during a highly contagious, deadly pandemic, these are both equally risky. I mean, this is absolutely absurd. And notice that they're moving the goalpost. So back in summer, it was okay for you to construct the curriculum of mostly online courses, and then you supplement that with some in-person days. But now they're not even allowing for any compromises in spite of the necessity to minimize person-to-person contact as cases soar. Now they're just saying, no, you're not going to do that. It's going to be our way or the highway. You're going to pretend as if everything is fine and there's no pandemic, and you're going to send your kids back to school whether you like it or not. And Donald Trump is trying to enforce this at the university level by punishing universities that offer only online classes in the fall. In fact, if a university, in an attempt to combat COVID-19, offers online courses only, then Trump is going to restrict the visas of international students, specifically F1 and M1 visas. They will not be allowed to stay in the countries if the university that they attend only offers an online course. So, in other words, this is a huge fuck you to anyone who came to the United States to get an education. And this is incredibly cruel, and I know a lot of people who will be affected by this because in my PhD program, most of the students were international students, and the way that it usually works is if you're going to take online courses, you need to take at least 3 credits, I believe. It depends probably on the university in order to maintain that visa. Except they had a waiver for this back in spring, but now they're just withdrawing the visa, and they're saying, look, if you do all online to social distance, then you can't study at this institution. So what you need to do is either take that semester off, or you can try to find, a different university and actually do in-person courses and, put yourself at risk. But this is also something that fucks with grad students, because if you are a PhD student and, you finished all of your coursework and you're just doing your dissertation research and you're teaching classes and you don't need to actually take any credits, then you basically have to take credits when you don't need to. Put yourself at an extra risk unnecessarily, all to appease Donald Trump for his xenophobic reasons. Like, he's trying to find an excuse to use ICE against immigrants, even legal immigrants. But I mean, this is preposterous. What is happening here is honestly just baffling to me, and I don't think we're fully going to appreciate how absurd this is until it's like 10 or 20 years down the line and we look back at this moment. The fact that we allow this to happen is astonishing. They are not just pretending like COVID-19 isn't a thing, but they're forcing everyone else to go along with it, pretend like it's not a thing. And if that puts you at risk, so be it. Now, putting aside the university level thing, like if you are a parent, you are faced with an impossible decision come fall. You can either send your kid to school and risk them contracting COVID-19 and bringing it home to you, or maybe someone in your family who's immunocompromised or elderly and vulnerable, or you can try to homeschool them. But the problem is that a lot of working class families don't even have that as an option, right? Because school is basically a form of daycare because the cost of daycare is too high for people. So they usually just send their kids to school while both parents work, and that's what they do. Like, that's the school watches their children for them. But if you don't want to get COVID-19, then that's not an option. I mean, this is really putting people in a horrible predicament, and Trump on Twitter keeps talking about the need to reopen schools normally. But if you want that to happen, then you have to solve the problem. You can't pretend as if COVID-19 isn't a thing anymore. You have to actually stop the spread of it. And there are things that he can do, measures he can take as president to do just that. So this isn't an issue, so we don't have to fight him on it, right? Require people to wear masks. Sign an executive order that says you are not allowed to enter a federal building without a mask, right? Convince your supporters to wear masks by wearing one yourself. There are things you can do to make it so that way this isn't an issue. But because he is incapable of doing the right thing and already views this as a political loser since he's checked out, he's just saying, fuck it. You're going to pretend like this isn't a thing, the pandemic's over, or else. I mean, this is truly despicable, but it really speaks to the cruelty of this administration. He has no empathy for human beings. He doesn't care about what he's doing. He just wants to do whatever will help him politically. Whatever's politically expedient is exactly the course of action that he's going to take, even if he is hurting Americans in a concrete way. I will admit that I genuinely enjoy dunking on Republicans who are stupid enough to think that there's no difference between politicians like Nancy Pelosi and AOC and put them in the same category, or say that they're coastal elites and there's no differences between them. I mean, this is absurd. There's no nuance. And you look like a clown if you say something like this. But I mean, Republicans have always been hyperbolic, but they're now taking their hyperbole to a new level, a level that we really haven't seen since the Obama era when they were concerned trolling about maybe he's a secret Marxist, which is a joke because he's not a Marxist at all. He couldn't be further from being a Marxist. But now, what one Republican at least is saying, Tom Fitton, a far-right political pundit, is that, these large corporations that the left rails against, they're actually not capitalist at all. And in fact, they are the allies of the left because they're helping us overthrow capitalism and institute a full-blown communist regime. Yes, you heard that correct. He's going to suggest here in this clip that I'm going to play for you that large multi-billion-dollar companies are not capitalist, they're communist, and they're helping us overthrow capitalism. He believes this. Someone who gets paid to do political commentary said this on national television in an interview with Lou Dobbs on Fox Business. Now, this was a discussion that they were having about Donald Trump denouncing the far-left fascists, which isn't a thing. But watch what you see here, because this conversation was genuinely unhinged.
But I want to get, if you will, a sense from you as to the president taking on, for the first time, corporate America and its role in this left-wing fascism that is being bred in this country. I have to give the president great credit because that took great courage.
Well, that was one of the most important speeches, not only of his presidency, but of any recent American presidency in terms of highlighting the left's assault on our freedoms. And one of the dirty little secrets, the left would have you believe that corporate America is on the side of the right or conservatives. That's far from the truth. On cultural constitutional issues, the leftists control the corporations. They're pressuring social media to censor Trump, censor conservatives. They are subsidizing, literally, the left that's trying to overthrow the country now through a communist revolution. It's a troubling time period, and we got to highlight that corporations are no friend of our values on these key issues.
But when it comes to buying politicians, rigging the economy, polluting the planet for profit, dismantling workers' rights, busting up unions, then these large corporations are definitely our allies. I mean, what a delusional take. Who believes this? Like, listening to him speak almost made my head explode. That's how stupid this individual is, and it's so frustrating to me that the people who shill for capitalism the most are the ones who typically understand it the least. If you want to understand the motivations of these types of large multinational corporations, all you have to do is follow the money. The one thing that they want to do is maximize profit, and that's it. They are not woke because they want communism or cultural Marxism, whatever delusional conspiracy theory you believe, any action that they take is going to be to serve the interests of their shareholders, to maximize profits. And that's it. That's the one thing that you use to dictate their behavior, to try to predict what they're trying to do. The question is, will this make me money? If yes, then I will take that course of action. So, I mean, if you're a capitalist, then you should understand this the most. I, a socialist, shouldn't have to explain this to capitalists, but here we are. Now, Lou Dobbs, also, we can't let him off the hook. He said that Donald Trump was so brave to call out the role of corporate America in assisting left-wing fascism. Left-wing fascism is not a thing. Fascism is inherently right-wing, right? It's right-wing authoritarianism. It's totalitarianism that hinges on nationalism. So, I mean, for you to say left-wing fascism, that's like saying the alt-left is a thing. It's delusional, it doesn't exist, and you're basically just saying, no you, but to the left, right? When we say you're being increasingly fascist as a far-right party, your response is to say, well, what about the far-left fascists? It doesn't work because that's not the way that ideology works, because it's convenient for you. So Tom Fitton, he says that the left is assaulting our freedom. So we'll kind of take this, sentence by sentence here. And my question to that, before we get to the communism thing, is how exactly are the left assaulting your freedoms when the president just a month ago threatened to violently crack down on protesters using the military? He did crack down on protesters who were peacefully protesting outside of the White House for a photo op. The president literally just said that we should jail anyone for an entire year if they so much as desecrate the flag. And we're the ones who are cracking down on freedom? We're the ones who are assaulting your freedom? Remind me again who actually has power in government. Is it the left? No, it's the far right. So for you to say something like this, not only is it hyperbolic, but it's stupid. He also says, quote, one of the dirty little secrets, the left would have you believe that corporate America is on the side of the right and conservatives. That's far from the truth. Well, they're going to be on the side of whichever political party is going to help them maximize profits. And in our late-stage capitalist system, that's both parties. That's both parties. The difference between Democrats and Republicans is that Democrats try to hide the way that they shill for large multinational corporations, and they're at least woke when they do it. So rather than just saying we need to increase profits of these companies and do what we can to encourage a free market economy, we want to make sure that those corporate boards are stacked with enough women and people of color. Like, that's really the difference. But both parties serve the interests of their donors. They try to promote this neoliberal cult that we're seeing. So, I mean, for you to suggest that we're suggesting that, you're kind of constructing a straw man argument, and it's not true. Like, I don't think that the left would assert that corporate America is on the side of right-wing conservatives exclusively. Like, nobody's saying that, especially socialists who you deem as the far left. Now let's get to the gem here of all gems. This is basically the grand finale. He says, the leftists control the corporations. Leftists control corporations because the Waltons and Jeff Bezos, they're super, super left. They're pressuring social media to censor Trump, censor conservatives. They're subsidizing literally the leftists trying to overthrow the country now through a communist revolution. I genuinely don't know what that means. I try to, pick up on the cues that these right-wingers use to try to fill in the blanks, but here I'm blank. How specifically are large multinational, multi-billion-dollar companies trying to subsidize the communist revolution that the left supposedly wants? I'm waiting. The only thing I could guess here is that, maybe he thinks that Nike supporting Black Lives Matter and hiring Colin Kaepernick for a shoe campaign or whatever they were doing, like, that is their way of supporting the far left. And, if you make a couple of jumps, then this means that they're also trying to support communism. But even that is, it's so difficult to fill in the blanks to get to that level of a logical leap, even for an idiot like this. Like, what he's saying here doesn't make sense, right? It's like me just saying Donald Trump is a fascist communist. It makes no sense because Donald Trump isn't a communist, he's a fascist. But if I say fascist and communist and I put those two words together to make some new meaning, I have to explain myself. But he doesn't explain himself because he doesn't really know what he's talking about. Like, this is an individual who is a political commentator who gets paid to do political commentary, probably a lot more than I make. And he thinks that large multi-billion-dollar companies who are capitalist are trying to help the left overthrow capitalism, which benefits them, and institute a communist regime. I mean, I don't think I have to really dissect this. It's just stupid. And usually I try to avoid just saying, oh, well, what you said is dumb, because I think that it's intellectually lazy usually, and I can do better than that with regard to my own political commentary, but I genuinely don't know what to take away from this. He thinks that large corporations like Walmart want communism. Do you honestly think that Walmart or Amazon, Jeff Bezos, want communism? Do you think that Elon Musk wants communism? In what world would billionaires and CEOs want communism? Because they are supporting left-wing social causes like Black Lives Matter or LGBTQ rights, maybe that's why he thinks that these companies want communism, but they're supporting these social causes at a surface level specifically because they think that that is going to get them more money. Because if you virtue signal, if you say, hey, we support you because here's a rainbow flag, maybe you hope that gay customers will want to come in and, give you business. Maybe you think that you'll get some brownie points from people who support these social justice causes. But I mean, I'm reading more into this than I need to because this is just genuine stupidity. And that's all that this boils down to. Like, he's just trying to use buzzwords like communist. But if you're going to use these words, you have to understand what they mean. You can't just throw around communism, especially within the context of large multi-billion-dollar companies, because I can assure you, they are the furthest from communism. Nobody hates communism more than these companies. They are capitalist, and I promise you, they will never assist the left in instituting a communist takeover. That's never going to happen. Tom Fitton, please seek help. You absolutely need it. So Representative Ilhan Omar recently gave what I think is a really powerful speech. And before I even tell you what this speech was about, who she was talking to, where she gave this speech, you already are probably assuming that there was a lot of backlash to whatever she said. And if you assume that, you would be correct, because anytime Ilhan Omar says anything, whenever words come out of her mouth, right-wingers are automatically outraged. It's almost like they're looking for reasons to be triggered. But with that being said, take a look at what she recently tweeted out, a portion of her speech, and try to see if you can spot the controversy.
When America gets a cold, Black Americans get pneumonia. Our communities are the ones that are bearing the burden of the coronavirus more than any other. People of color make up this disproportionate share of low-wage essential workers who have had to keep working in food production plants, grocery stores, and other workplaces despite the risk to their lives. We've also faced higher rates of joblessness to the coronavirus crisis, while also suffering racialized police brutality and militarization. The mortality rate for Black Minnesotans to COVID is twice as high as it is with other races. And for me, this is very personal because I lost my own father to the coronavirus. I see the pain and the havoc it's wreaking on Black communities in Minneapolis. We must recognize that these systems of oppression are linked. As long as our economy and political systems prioritize profit without considering who is profiting, who is being shut out, we will perpetuate this inequality. So we cannot stop at criminal justice system. We must begin the work of dismantling the whole system of oppression wherever we find it.
I mean, that was a deeply passionate and powerful speech. She spoke about how COVID-19, which is affecting all of us but disproportionately affects people of color, just took her father's life. So she is speaking from personal experience about the necessity to dismantle institutional racism. I can't figure out why anyone would disagree with what she said unless they're explicitly racist, but nonetheless, right-wingers took issue with what she said. The first that I want to talk about is Tucker Carlson's response. Now, I don't have to play the segment for you. I think that if you just see this image, this still image from his show, and look at the chyron, it tells you everything you need to know about his reaction. We have to fight to preserve our nation and heritage. So she says we have to dismantle institutional racism and the systems that oppress people of color. And in response, conservatives take that as, oh, she wants to destroy America. And as a result, we have to fight to preserve our nation and heritage. I mean, at this point, Tucker Carlson might as well just yell white power and show up to record with the white hood, because his white supremacy is so overt and explicit at this point that, you know, it's amazing to me that Fox News allows this to happen. And he's gonna, you know, complain every time there's backlash when he says explicitly racist things and, you know, denounce cancel culture. But this is someone who should not be on the air, who is explicitly white supremacist. Like, this is dangerous. People who are watching Fox News are getting basically what the KKK wants you to hear in things like this. But Tucker Carlson isn't alone, because other Republican Party lawmakers were extremely offended by, you know, Ilhan Omar's perfectly reasonable speech. As John Nichols of The Nation explains, House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy pushed the hyperbole button and tweeted, "The Democratic Party has given up on America. All they want to do is tear it down." Trump Jr. demanded to know whether presumptive Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden agreed with Omar's argument and warned if Joe Biden wins in November, these are the people who will be the thought leaders in the Democratic Party. These will be the policies that the Democrats push. Wake up, America. Fox News host Tucker Carlson played Omar's statement about dismantling systems of oppression, labeled her a vandal, and grumbled that she hates us. Senator Marsha Blackburn took things even further. Ilhan Omar took an oath to defend and protect the Constitution, not shred it, roared the Tennessee Republican. Omar and her Marxist comrades are a threat to our democracy. Omar should resign. So let's just pause for a moment and back up. In response to her sharing her personal experience about how institutional racism affected her and led to her father dying, their response is to scream bloody murder, call on her to resign, accuse her of wanting to destroy America. There are no words to really capture how disgusting this party is. This is a white supremacist party, and this party should not exist. Cancel the Republican Party. They need to not exist. We already have a different right-wing party who could take their place, the Democrats. This is unacceptable. And as John Nichols put it, they're telling on themselves here with their outrage to her calling for the dismantling of institutional racism. They're telling on themselves. They're saying they don't want to dismantle institutional racism. They like that there's a racial hierarchy in America, and they want to keep it that way. Anyone who doesn't want to keep it that way, they want to destroy America, because America is supposed to be white. That's basically what they're saying. It's morally reprehensible, but these are the people who claim to have the moral high ground, right? They're religious. If you're Marsha Blackburn and Tucker Carlson claims to care about America, I mean, this is just disgusting. Now, rather than going on about the response, Ilhan Omar, she defended herself, rightfully so. I think that the left needs to learn from people like Ilhan Omar who don't run away from their original statements, especially if they're correct. And John Nichols explains, Omar then turned the discussion toward those who refuse to embrace systematic change in a time when that is precisely what is needed. She suggested that instead of asking why Democrats will not compromise in order to achieve piecemeal progress, reporters might ask members of the Senate's Republican majority, as well as cautious Democrats, how come you are not negotiating with them? How come you are not listening to the voices that have been marginalized for decades and centuries in this country? How come you are not listening to the cries of the mothers and the fathers in our communities? How come you are not listening to the people who are telling you that we don't feel like our lives matter equally in this country? Because when you have legislators who are living every single day in the midst of communities that are constantly feeling pain, being told by legislators who have no idea, not a single idea, not because they've lived through it or because they represent people living through it, constantly telling them what should be and what can be acceptable treatment for themselves and for the communities that they represent. And I just think that is really the most emblematic part of this conversation, and it's truly why we continue to have a system that isn't equal for us. Yeah, beautifully put. It's honestly deeply depressing and soul-crushing that speech, which is completely just not controversial at all, it should be common sense, was the point of outrage for a lot of Senate Republicans. And they weren't just like behind the scenes griping about Ilhan Omar's speech. They're very openly saying, this call to dismantle institutional racism, that just means you want to destroy America. I mean, they have no shame. It's disturbing, quite frankly. So I don't know what else to say. I feel really bad for people like Ilhan Omar, who, in spite of all of the vitriol directed at her, still continues to fight, not just for her community, but everyone else. I mean, she is doing more and deals with more than anyone else in Congress, and truly, I don't envy her position, but I deeply respect her for everything that she's doing. I mean, her speech is common sense, and it's sad that saying we should get rid of institutional racism is that controversial in 2020, but you have to understand that we haven't made as much progress as we wanted to believe that we've made, right? We made strides, sure, when it comes to social and racial justice, but racism has the tendency to adapt to new political settings. It transforms, it evolves, right? So, these people in Congress, like Marsha Blackburn and Kevin McCarthy, we have to end their careers. They have to be kicked out of Congress because it's not acceptable to have backlash, to feel outraged at the call to end institutional racism. That is the definition of white supremacy. So unless you're living under a rock, then I'm sure by now you've heard that Kanye West will indeed be running for president, and he made his announcement on July 4th. So there's a lot to say about that, but I'm not going to get into that in this video because I think that deserves its own separate segment. But what I do want to talk about with regard to the Kanye story is the response to Kanye West's announcement, namely from actress Deborah Messing. And in fact, I'm not entirely sure that she's an actress. She might be a singer or both, maybe. Either way, it doesn't matter. Her response was, it was problematic to say the least. So in response to Kanye West's announcement, she tweeted out, "He's playing Jill Stein. He's trying to take young black voters from Joe Biden. It's disgusting." Yeah, that's going to be a big yikes from me. What's disgusting is this tweet. Because what is the implication of this tweet? It's insulting, it's demeaning, and quite frankly, it's racist. Because the implication is that young black voters are so stupid that the minute a black rapper announces that he's going to run for president, those votes that were otherwise owed to Joe Biden are just going to go directly to Kanye West. But Kanye West has black fans and white fans. So why is it that she's not necessarily worried about the white fans voting for Kanye West? Well, it's because she thinks that black voters are too stupid to think for themselves. At least that's the subtext here. So what she's saying is unacceptable, right? It's racist. Why would you also assume that just because he's a rapper, young black voters would be inclined to support him, even if they don't know what his policy positions are? But I mean, anything that I've heard from Kanye West with regard to political rhetoric, I mean, he would probably appeal more to older white evangelicals. So I hate what she's saying here because it really oversimplifies politics. And it's just intellectually lazy. It'd be as if Pete Buttigieg announced that he's running for president under some third-party run, and she'd be mad because all of the LGBTQ plus voters will all of a sudden gravitate towards Pete Buttigieg. When, for me, as someone from the LGBTQ community, I would find that deeply insulting because we're more complex than that. We actually value substance. And obviously the same is true for young black voters. So for her to say this, I mean, it's just a bad take. And obviously she was called out for it. So Nina Turner responded saying, "You just can't stop dipping, can you, Deborah Messing? Your connotation is racist. 1, black voters are not owned by anyone. Our vote should be earned every election cycle. 2, we can think for ourselves and don't need your help. 3, sometimes it's best to stay out of family business." Teslin Figueredo tweeted, "Deborah Messing assumes black voters will vote for Kanye West because he is black. Shakes my head. The level of disrespect is high with this one." To which Killer Mike responded, saying to that, "She thinks we are trained dogs, sis." And Nina Turner shared a quote from an author, which really speaks to a bigger issue here. There's this double standard because when it comes to white swing voters, you see at least the last 2 Democratic Party nominees craft their entire platform around appealing to those people, but they make no effort to reach out to black voters, right? Or the left in general. But when we're talking about black voters, they don't have to meet black voters and earn their votes. Black voters have to follow through and be there for the politicians, which is never acceptable. So this is the quote from the author Candy J, shared by Nina Turner, which reads, "While white swing voters are largely treated like political free agents who must be persuaded to vote for candidates they like, Ibram Kendi discerns on The Atlantic that people of color and young people are treated like political cattle who must be whipped into shape to turn out for candidates they often don't like. Candidates and campaigns routinely change their profile to better attract the white swing voter. voter, but people of color and young people usually find that the change has come at their expense. As Candy astutely sees it, young black voters are encouraged to vote, while white swing voters are encouraged to vote for candidates. Now, Nina Turner responded to this quote saying, "This right here hits the nail on the head. We must reject the notion that black voters or voters of color owe folks a vote. Our votes must be earned. Are we free agents or not? Inquiring minds want to know." And that's exactly right. Now, Deborah Messing is the exact kind of liberal who probably has read Robin DiAngelo's White Fragility, and if she has indeed read that book, like I'm assuming she has, most liberals have, then what is one of the core points of that book? I mean, the title is White Fragility. It's getting white people to not instinctively overreact and be insulted when somebody points out their racism. And rather than trying to, be defensive and say, no, I'm not being racist, what you should do is listen to voices from people of color and try to learn and grow from their experience and let them educate you. But what does Deborah Messing do in response? She doubled down and she made matters exponentially worse for herself because she responded to all of the backlash saying, "Oh, please, Nina, Kanye is an avowed Trump supporter. Trump's numbers have plummeted. Trump doubles down on his racist platform at Mount Rushmore, and 100 days before election, Kanye is going to announce now? I thought you were smarter than that, Nina. Clearly, it is an attempt to help Trump. Biden swept the African-American vote in the South. Kanye has millions of young African-American fans. It's not racist to say that Kanye can take Biden-leaning voters from him. It's numbers, statistics. If you want to use this to grab your spotlight, by all means. If you really care about the African American community having their vote counted, I'll have Stacey Abrams call you when I speak with her this week." So hold on, let's just reverse for a moment. Deborah Messing just said, "I'm going to have Stacey Abrams scold you and educate you on this issue." Are you serious? Are you serious? Oh my God, the audacity of Deborah Messing, someone with an estimated net worth of $25 million, trying to rich-splain and white-splain the issue of black voters to Nina Turner, one of the most influential black leaders in America. I mean, the gall on her. This is what money does to you, right? You surround yourself with yes men, and they never tell you that some of your ideas are stupid. So you just think that everyone should listen to you, and when they don't, this is what we see. We see your entitled attitude come out full blast. So in response to that, Brianna Joy Gray tweeted, "Deborah Messing says she'll have Stacey Abrams call Nina Turner to explain the African American community to her." And as Dr. Victoria Dooley brilliantly put it, Deborah thinks Stacey Abrams is the manager of black voters. Bye, Karen. That is actually a very Karen thing to do. What she's saying here is honestly, it's baffling. The fact that she can't see why black people perceive her statement to be insulting, I mean, I don't know what to say. You're just dense. You are just dense if you can't see the issue. And to make matters worse, you threatened to bring in your black friend to uphold your shitty point, which is a bad point that you should just let go. Like, take the L, sit down. But, I'm going to let Nina Turner handle this because I don't have to respond. Nina Turner said everything that needs to be said about this, and I don't like to use this particular word because it's not 2016 anymore, but Nina Turner straight up destroyed Deborah Messing. She wrote, Deborah Messing. So you go from bad to worse. The leader of the Karen coalition strikes again. Although it is customary for the Karens to call the manager on black folk, how dare you attempt to create public conflict between two black women leaders in the public space? Not only is it disrespectful to Stacey Abrams and me, it is disrespectful to our black foremothers who sacrificed so we could have a voice in the first damn place. Your attempt to use Stacey as if black women have not been used enough over the last 400 years as the black manager friend card proves my original point, which is black people are not a monolith. You questioning my intellect is one of the oldest smears in the book. Black people have faced this stereotype since the inception of this country. It is racist to continue insisting that black people, seasoned or young, will vote for Kanye West solely because he is black. In case you didn't realize it, Kanye has white and black fans, yet you continue to insult black voters. Further, since you are into numbers and statistics, over 40% of young black voters prefer progressive policies over popularity. My original reply to you was not about Kanye and his intentions to run for president, but about you minimizing black people's power at the polls. Lastly, don't you ever fix your mouth to question my love for my people. I have been a black woman all my life. And finally, she ends with a gif of her saying, hello, somebody. Yeah, that deserves a slow clap. Nina Turner is a national treasure, and we don't deserve her, and I will fight anybody who threatens Nina Turner. I love her. And as Tim Black put it, Deborah should create a new account because Nina just killed this one. #flatline. And, you know, that's exactly what happened. She came up with a bad take, she doubled down, she got demolished, and that's the end of the story. Nope, we're not done because she kept digging, believe it or not. Let me repeat that. She kept digging and she tripled down. She tweeted out, "Oh, Nina Turner, your historical bitterness that Bernie lost the primary by 4 million votes has skewed your reading comprehension. I said the Kanye stunt was trying to help Trump, whose numbers with African-American voters are abysmal. Fact, not racism. By using his fame to take young African-American votes away from Biden, whose numbers with African-American Southern voters were astronomical. Another fact. Sorry, I know they're inconvenient. I never said that black voters were a monolith. That's your narrative. I said Kanye would pull votes because he has fans, period. Black and white, obviously, but in case you don't know, Trump does well with white people. So why would a rabid Trump fan like Kanye run for president against his buddy? Let's think. Sorry, Nina, I'm not going to stand by and let you write a narrative that doesn't exist. I'm incensed that you would suggest that I am trying to divide two black women. You accused me of having no respect for black voters. It is laughable. I referenced Stacey, who is an inspired leader whose governorship was stolen through voter suppression and is spearheading an effort to ensure African-American people aren't disenfranchised. Would I be following/supporting/led by Stacey if I was this racist minimizer you slanderously paint me to be? The answer is obviously no. It's laughable. Let me just pause. She's literally using the I have a black friend card. Wow. Nina, there are so much more important things going on that I'm going to now focus on. I am not interested in supporting this bit of drama you have constructed. Just a reminder, Trump is a white supremacist who is doing nothing as we reach 130,000 deaths by COVID, 40 million unemployed, and has done nothing to protect our soldiers from being assassinated for 100K by Putin, to name a few catastrophes coming out of this administration. I sure hope you have learned from 2016 and will put our country and the safety of her most marginalized first this time. So you're explaining all of this to Nina Turner as if she doesn't know the threat that Trump poses. And notice how she's kind of walking back her original statement. Oh, I never said that just the black voters would fall for Kanye West and vote for him. Except, what was that tweet again? She says, and I quote, he's playing Jill Stein. He's trying to take young black voters from Biden. We saw the tweet. You don't get to do revisionist history when we can literally go back a couple of days on your timeline and see what you wrote. So, I mean, it's ridiculous, but Nina Turner, again, had a brilliant response. She stated, now I'm a bitter black woman who can't comprehend Deborah Messing. You are well out of your depth, baby. You need to read this moment, but you can't even do that. Stop using other people to cover for your ineptness. Repeat after me. I, Deborah Messing, am a racist and I need help. I use my white privilege and stereotypes as attributes for black women I don't agree with. For black women I like, I use the black friend card and demand that they go check another black woman. Moreover, I don't respect the agency of black people, which is why I am very comfortable ascribing my beliefs onto black people, especially if they do not act accordingly. I am that white liberal that Congresswoman Shirley Chisholm, Malcolm X, and Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King warned about, and the sad part is I don't even know it. My lack of awareness is linked to my white privilege and neoliberal cloak. Confession is so good for the soul. Now, don't you feel better? You are like most neoliberals who believe the status quo is okay and that all the suffering in the world started in 2016. You lack the courage to deal with the fact that black people, poor people, working class people, and other marginalized groups were catching hell well before 2016. You prefer conformity and illusion over righteous critique and substance. You are dazzled by a type of politics that celebrates being better than Trump without understanding how critically dangerous and low that bar is. You are, as Frederick Douglass described, among those who profess to favor freedom and yet depreciate agitation, are men who want crops without plowing up the ground. Know this, you are messing with the wrong one because I am that 1 in 10,000. Now, because she got checked once again, and quite frankly embarrassed by Nina Turner, she didn't directly respond to Nina Turner, but instead she passive-aggressively retweeted people who were shitting on Nina Turner. For example, she retweeted this from a lady named Rita, and it says, you cannot reason with Nina Turner. She is toxic Bernie. As in 16, she'd rather see Trump win than anyone but Bernie win. She'll play the race card if you try to reason. Thank you, though, for trying. You speak for many. So understand that by retweeting that, she's kind of telling on herself. And, since she lost this argument spectacularly, all she can do is say, well, you know what, Nina, you must like Donald Trump. No, the point that Nina was trying to make went straight over your head because you got too defensive to see what she is trying to tell you. You made an idiotic point. Just apologize and move on. Like, you didn't have to double down. You didn't have to make matters worse by threatening to bring your black friend to correct another black woman. Like, you didn't have to do this, but you took it there and you embarrassed yourself. And rather than just like taking a seat and taking the L, you chose to continue this. So now you don't get to cry and play the victim. You're worth $25 million. You're going to be okay no matter who wins, right? But what you should do if you actually are the liberal that you say you are is actually try to listen to people with a different perspective than you and not shut them down, not explain to them what politics is, because politics to you, a multimillionaire, is very different than the politics of someone like Nina Turner, who actually has lived through struggle. So this was just embarrassing, but I really don't need to say much more because I think that Nina Turner said everything that needed to be said here. That is incredibly embarrassing for Deborah Messing, and will she take the L in future bad tags? Probably not, but at least, we can make fun of her, I guess. So there's that. Yikes. I swear to God, I tried to avoid talking about the Kanye West presidential run story because I don't think that he's serious. I think this is a publicity stunt, and I don't want to inadvertently feed into that, right? I think he's doing this to promote his new EP or album or whatever he's doing. But I don't think he's serious. He hasn't given us any indication that he's serious about this. He hasn't filed any paperwork. And on top of that, he's missed the deadline in a number of states. You can't run in New York. You can't make it on the ballot in Illinois. And if you want to qualify to be on the ballot in California, then he has less than 30 days to get 200,000 signatures. And if you don't have a political campaign or apparatus of any kind, you're not going to make that happen. I don't care how famous you are. So I don't think he's serious. However, he's now veering into the realm of politics, and even if he doesn't run for president, he could still have a negative impact on the broader political discourse based on what he's saying. So let's start from the beginning. On July 4th, he announced he'd be running for president, tweeting, "We must now realize the promise of America by trusting God. No thank you. Unifying our vision and building our future. I am running for president of the United States. Hashtag 2020 vision." Now, immediately after he put out this tweet, billionaire Elon Musk responded saying, "You have my full support." Because, of course, that's what Elon Musk would tweet out. Now, my question to Kanye is, why would you run for president if you don't care about politics and you don't know anything about politics? Like, do you even know the difference between Democrats and Republicans? Like, do you know how many branches of government there are? And I'm not saying that to be condescending. I'm saying Kanye West, like, based on what we have learned from him in a new Forbes interview, he is deeply naive, and his views range from social progressivism when it comes to issues like criminal justice, but outright theocratic totalitarianism when it comes to issues like prayer in school. And it's scary. So if you don't know about politics, why are you getting involved? So, I mean, the reason why I'm talking about this in spite of my reluctance is because even if he doesn't run for president, it seems like he won't be able to run in 2020. If you are talking about things like this, which we're about to see, where you're spreading misinformation and conspiracy theories that are deeply dangerous at a time when there's this anti-science, anti-mask fervor in America, we have to call you out. We have to. So there's a couple of things that the article or the interview points out here. And the first thing that is clear is that he doesn't really have any allegiance to one political party. He says that he would run as a Republican if Trump weren't in office. But, since Trump is in office, he doesn't want to be a Republican. So he's choosing to run under the banner of the birthday party, literally. Because if he's elected, then every day will be like a birthday for Americans.
Okay.
Now, additionally, he claims that he's no longer a supporter of Donald Trump, but he still very clearly has an affinity for Donald Trump, and he also has already preemptively selected Elon Musk as his running mate, because why wouldn't he? Of course, and he wants to make Elon Musk the head of America's space program. I don't think he'd be interested in that because he's interested in profit. But nonetheless, the first thing that I want to get to is whether or not he can run at all, because he still thinks that he can run for president in 2020. Because according to Forbes, he believes an argument could be made to get onto any ballots he's missed, citing coronavirus issues. I'm speaking with experts. I'm going to speak with Jared Kushner, the White House, with Biden, says West.
That's not how it works. That's not how any of this works.
Why would Donald Trump and Joe Biden help you get on the ballot if you're running against them? That makes no sense. Why would they help you? I mean, ask the Green Party or the Libertarian Party how welcoming Democrats and Republicans are to third-party candidates. Why would you think they're going to help you? Because you're Kanye West? I mean, the level of entitlement here and delusion, it's stunning to me. It really is. Now, some other things here that he points out. He never voted in his life, which, I mean, that's not necessarily a bad thing. You know, you could blame that as a failure on our institutions and politicians. But he also says that he had COVID-19 in February. This is kind of a side point. And he says that if he were to ever be in control of the White House, he would structure it the way that the government of Wakanda is structured. For those of you who don't know, Wakanda is a fictional government in a fictional movie about superheroes with superpowers. But that's what he'd model his White House after. Jesus Christ. This is going to be a long video, so buckle up. So let's get to the policies, because this is where things take a turn for the downright terrifying and totalitarian, quite frankly. When asked what his plan to deal with COVID-19 is, well, simply put, it's prayer. We pray. We pray for the freedom. It's all about God. We need to stop doing things that make God mad. Your response to a pandemic is prayer? Using that logic then, which is stupid logic, why would you run for president? Because can't you just use your influence now to pray away COVID-19? Why do you have to be president to encourage prayer? Aren't people already doing that? I mean, it doesn't make sense. Believe it or not, it gets worse, because on the subject of vaccines, he says it's so many of our children that are being vaccinated and paralyzed. So when they say the way we're going to fix COVID is with a vaccine, I'm extremely cautious. That's the mark of the beast. They want to put chips inside of us. They want to do all kinds of things to make it where we can't cross the gates of heaven. I'm sorry when I say they, the humans that have the devil inside them. And the saddest thing is that we all won't make it into heaven, that there'll be some of us that do not make it. Next question. Let's just pause for a moment and try to take all of that in. So we're dealing with a pandemic. Maybe the one thing that will save us, since we're not accepting social distancing or the economy to be shut down for a prolonged period of time, since we're refusing to wear masks, I mean, the one thing that could save us, a vaccine, he's saying, no, I don't like that because it's the mark of the beast. Yeah, no, not okay. There's enough people in America who are anti-science, flat earthers, anti-vaxxers, and conspiratorial. We don't need more of that in American politics. We need less of it. We need more people who are not delusional, who are pro-science. But he just thinks that, the answer to everything is prayer. And people who are promoting vaccines, they have the devil and they're not going to make it to heaven. If you're president, you shouldn't be worrying about people's eternal salvation. You should be focusing on policy. But it gets worse. When it comes to foreign policy, he hasn't developed one yet. Quote, I haven't developed it yet. I'm focused on protecting America first with our great military. Let's focus on ourselves first. On the issue of abortion, I am pro-life because I'm following the word of the Bible. Okay, if your response to foreign policy is, I don't know, don't run for president. And hopefully he'll take that pro-life position that he has with regard to abortion and apply it to foreign policy. That's a good starting place. But I mean, the things that are going on in the world are so complex that we can't have someone, again, like Donald Trump, start at having zero knowledge. Like, we need someone to come in with knowledge about the complex situations going on in the world, the Israel-Palestine situation, Morocco's occupation of the Western Sahara, the conflict between India and China. I mean, there's so much going on that we can't afford to have another dipshit be in power. But he goes on, he's asked about prayer in schools, and he's for it. He says, reinstate in God's state, in God's country, the fear and love of God in all schools and organizations, and you chill the fear and love of everything else. So that was a plan by the devil, to have our kids committing suicide at an all-time high by removing God, to have murders in Chicago at an all-time high because the human beings working for the devil removed God and prayer from the schools. That means more drugs, more murders, more suicide. On tax policy, I haven't done enough research on that yet. I will research that with the strongest experts that serve God and come back with the best solution. And that will be my answer for everything that I haven't researched. I have the earplug in, and I'm going to use that earplug. Okay, I don't know what that means, but if you are explicitly looking for people who will serve God, you're going to find the evangelicals, and they're most likely going to encourage you to come up with a tax plan that will lead to you getting a cut in your taxes. And on top of that, to say that, the reason why there's all of these children committing suicide and, all of this murder is because God has been taken out of the schools. This is exactly what evangelicals say. They would go for this. They would love this. They'd be enthusiastic about this platform. This is theocracy. He wants to make America like the Christian equivalent of Saudi Arabia. And this is just disgusting. Now, when it comes to George Floyd, he does seem to initially offer prayer as the main solution in lieu of criminal justice reform, but he does eventually land on amending the Constitution, saying, well, God has already started the healing / this conversation alone is healing and revealing / we all need to start praying and kneeling. Another bar after that. But when a rhyme comes together, I'm going to complete it, not inside the lines created by organizations that we know as our reality. The schools, the infrastructure was made for us to not truly be all we can be, but to be just good enough to work for the corporations that designed the school systems. Never mind. We're tearing that up. What we'll do is we're not going to tear up the Constitution. What we will do is amend. So unless we're talking about charter schools, corporations did not design the school systems. I don't know what he's trying to get at here. But what he's saying doesn't really make any sense, and he's kind of just rambling, and he doesn't seem well. On top of that, when it comes to other policy priorities, he does say that he's against the death penalty because the Bible says thou shalt not kill. So there's that. And when it comes to other priorities, he wants to, quote, clean up the chemicals in our deodorant and our toothpaste. There are chemicals that affect our ability to be of service to God. I don't really know what that means. Maybe it means more regulations. But if you're appealing to Republicans with this evangelical rhetoric, then they're going to be a little bit peeved if you're proposing more regulation. So he's kind of all over the place ideologically because he has no coherent political ideology. It's randomness. It's bizarre. It's weird. Now, he isn't 100% sure that he's still going to run in 2020. He wants to run. He's saying he's going to run, but it's possible that maybe he waits until 2024. But at the end of the day, it's not going to be up to states and whether or not, he makes their deadline. It's going to be up to God, because he says, let's see if the appointing is at 2020 or if it's 2024, because God appoints the president. If I win in 2020, then it was God's appointment. If I win in 2024, then that was God's appointment. So in his mind, he's so narcissistic that he believes that it's already a foregone conclusion. God is going to appoint him to the office of the presidency. It's just a matter of when. Maybe it won't be in 2024. Maybe it won't be in 2020, but if not, then maybe it'll be in 2024. It's just a matter of when God says, hey, Kanye, get in the White House. It's your time, bud. Yeah. So this is the guy that Elon Musk, the science guy, decided to endorse immediately after he announced that he'd be running for president. But when someone shared an article with him detailing how Kanye is a huge anti-vaxxer and anti-abortion, Elon responded saying, we may have more differences of opinion than I anticipated. You think? It's almost like politics isn't a game and people's lives are at stake. So, I read this, I see the policies that Kanye West is putting out there, and this is something that actually would be persuasive to a large contingent of the population. Because, I mean, think about this. After Donald Trump, a reality television star, became president, do you honestly think that this wouldn't appeal to someone in America? Especially the conspiracy theories? So, I mean, it's dangerous. Even if it's laughably incoherent, it still is going to appeal to a certain crowd, right? Conspiracy people, evangelicals. There is, I think, a demand for this type of weird politics, right? And maybe there'll be a cult of personality like Donald Trump that forms around him. So if he chooses to run for president and is serious, could he actually have a shot? I mean, it's possible. I'm not going to say yes, but it is possible. But I will say that, like, even though it's funny to, like, poke fun at his weird political ideas, it's deeply saddening because this is a man who's not well. And rather than encouraging this, people who are the closest to him, like his wife, his loved ones, they should be stepping in and saying, Kanye, let's stop doing this. He's not well. He is not well. He has delusions of grandeur. And the people around him who are letting this continue on, who know better, they're at fault here. I don't even necessarily blame Kanye West, because this is someone who mentally, he needs help. He needs people to help put him in check, right? Keep him grounded in reality. But we're not getting that. And, you know, until that happens, we still have to call this out. We can't allow him to propagate these types of conspiracy theories and spread misinformation about vaccines, say that the solution to COVID-19 is just prayer. This is absolutely nuts. It's unacceptable. And I say this as a fan of Kanye West, a former fan, I should say. I grew up on his music. Like, I was listening to him since The College Dropout, bought every single album. So, I mean, if you're going to get involved in politics and start, you know, spreading this totalitarian message of theocracy and prayer in schools and anti-vax bullshit, it's unacceptable, and we have to call you out because you can't be spreading this misinformation. You just can't. So he's not well. You know, if you're laughing at him instinctively, I understand, because what he's saying is nonsensical. But at the end of the day, you know, this is problematic for a number of reasons. Not just that I think it's because he's unwell, but because Americans would actually fall for something like this. After Donald Trump, maybe this is the next, you know, cult of personality that Republicans and evangelicals flock to. So I don't know. But I do know that I don't like what I see from Kanye West with regard to what little policies we know thus far. It's deeply, deeply troubling, to say the least. So the task forces that Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden formed at the end of the Democratic Party primary have come to a conclusion, and after months of deliberation on issues such as education, criminal justice reform, healthcare, climate change, they have predictably produced nothing of value. And I say that because, I mean, listen to Joe Biden's rhetoric. Has he moved at all on the issue of healthcare? Well, here's what he said in an interview with Medicare for All activist Adi Barkan.
It's no secret that I support Medicare for all.
I don't.
So obviously he hasn't budged at all, but don't worry, because he thinks that healthcare is a right and not a privilege. Wink, wink. I mean, it's embarrassing. And in 2019, if you were against Medicare for all, you should at least be moved a little bit in the direction after a pandemic, right? After the Supreme Court held that Donald Trump can let employers deny healthcare coverage on the basis of what they don't want to be offered if they're religious. I mean, he still hasn't changed in spite of all of this. You had no argument in 2019, and in 2020, you definitely don't have an argument. But regardless, he's standing strong.
It's no secret that I support Medicare for all.
I don't.
I hate him so much. I hate him so much. Now, if you ask people on the task forces, people who Bernie Sanders specifically appointed, like AOC, they don't necessarily feel as, you know, depressed about the outcome of these task forces as I do. For example, AOC tweeted, "Today, the 6 Biden-Sanders unity task forces are unveiling final language. The climate task force accomplished a great deal. It was an honor to serve as co-chair with Secretary John Kerry. Among the notable gains, we shaved 15 years off Biden's previous target for 100% clean energy. The climate task force has agreed to elevate Biden's climate standards across the board and adopt a whole of government mobilization, including ambitious construction, mass transit and transport, and ag standards plus investment, creating millions of good jobs, centering climate justice standards." So she feels as if they accomplished something. On top of that, Dr. Abdul El-Sayed, who was appointed to the healthcare task force alongside, Pramila Jayapal and others by Bernie Sanders, also feels as if these task forces were relatively successful, saying Joe Biden isn't Bernie. He does not support Medicare for all. We deeply disagree on this, but he does support universal coverage, expanding public coverage, reining in pharma and health equity, things we do agree on. Our task force recommendations build upon these aims. Now, listen, I truly respect and admire the effort that was made by people that Bernie Sanders appointed to these task forces. I think that AOC and Dr. Abdul El-Sayed, they were trying their best to, make progress where it's possible. But I think that this is, in the end, it's putting progressives and the left at a disadvantage because we're already showing our cards, right? We're telling the establishment we're definitely willing to compromise, and this is what we take. So if they know that we'd be willing to water down our own policies, then why would they give us the full package? They're going to give us what we've agreed to water down, and probably less than that, right? Because when you already pre-negotiate, well, you have to assume you will be negotiated down even further. And it's a bad strategy. And when it comes to something like Medicare for all, we shouldn't have to propose things to Biden to consider. He should be proposing things to us to get us on board, right? And the response shouldn't be, well, since, you don't support Medicare for all, we'll accept, reining in big pharma. No, our response should be, we're planting our feet in the ground and we're not budging. It's going to be Medicare for all. And if you are elected president, we're going to do everything in our power to fight to pass Medicare for all through Congress. And if you don't sign that fucking bill, we will stand outside of the White House with signs every single day until you do. We're going to fight you until you pass our policy. So, it seems like it's bad. It's getting progressives to show their cards and admit that we will accept the half measures that Democrats will only give us. And you don't want to do that. And I want the left to be more savvy. Now, I'm not saying that there's no potential for these task forces to produce good. Let's say, hypothetically speaking, we get one win without watering down any other policies. Let's say we don't get Medicare for all, but in exchange for him not adopting Medicare for all, he agrees to, sign on to legalizing cannabis nationwide. That would be beneficial. But we didn't get that either. As Politico reports, amid nationwide protests against police brutality, the criminal justice panel formed by Biden and Sanders got into heated debates in recent weeks over qualified immunity, a legal doctrine that shields police from being sued for misconduct. Progressives pushed to end it, but Biden appointees agreed only to sign on to a commitment to rein in the rule. Another flashpoint over marijuana ended similarly. Sanders' team argued in private meetings that they should legalize cannabis, but that idea was rejected. One task force member described the disagreements over qualified immunity and pot as huge battles, and multiple people involved said the criminal justice panel presented some of the biggest challenges for compromise. Now, what I don't understand is, let's say, hypothetically speaking, that the Sanders people were successful and they got the Biden people to agree to adopt legalizing cannabis. So they print it out, they put it on Joe Biden's desk, and they say, we recommend that you agree to legalize cannabis. He can unilaterally just say, no, I don't support it. So, at the end of the day, I'm failing to see the utility in this. It's good for corporate Democrats like Joe Biden because he knows we're already willing to concede and accept his half measures. Rather than pulling him, with his feet dragging to our side, we're having to go the distance to meet him halfway when he should be meeting us halfway, right? So we're having to compromise, but he's not willing to compromise. That's the issue here that I'm having with this. It seems weird to me that, you have a bunch of people on these task forces come up with policies to recommend to a candidate who can unilaterally accept or reject any of them. So, if they agreed on everything, if these task forces all held hands and sang kumbaya, Joe Biden doesn't necessarily have to agree to adopt these policies. And even if he did agree to adopt these policies, there's no guarantee that he would fight for them. So these seem like pointless efforts here. And again, I'm trying not to shit on what people like AOC and Dr. Abdul El-Sayed tried to do because I think they were trying, but it doesn't seem conducive to anything that will benefit the left. And if anything, it's going to lead to us being placated. Now, the entire document is more than 100 pages, so I can't possibly go through all of it. But it seems like a lot of the victories, the key victories for the left, come in the form of climate change, immigration, and a lot of Obama-era executive orders that Joe Biden is going to sign into law. As NBC News reports, the recommendations, though, include a significant number of actions Biden could direct the executive branch to take without congressional approval. Much as the Trump administration has systematically reversed Obama-era actions over his 4 years. They include executive orders on issues that are currently on the forefront of people's minds, like helping frontline workers, new guidelines on policing use of force measures, housing, outsourcing jobs, addressing healthcare disparities, and undoing Trump's executive orders on immigration. So in other words, the biggest victories that it seems like we got out of these task forces is that Joe Biden is being recommended to sign executive orders that undo the executive orders that Trump signed, which undid the executive orders that Obama signed, which I fully expected Joe Biden to do anyway. But the people involved seem very optimistic. Bernie Sanders tweeted, "While Joe Biden and I and our supporters have strong disagreements about some of the most important issues facing our country, we also understand that we must come together in order to defeat Donald Trump, the most dangerous president in modern American history. Though the end result isn't what I or my supporters would have written alone, the task forces have created a good policy blueprint that will move this country in a much-needed progressive direction and substantially improve the lives of working-class families throughout our country. I look forward to working with Vice President Biden to help him win this campaign and to move this country forward toward economic, racial, social, and environmental justice." Yeah, I mean, to me, all of this, frankly, seems like window dressing. It's not going to make Joe Biden more appealing if he, agrees that these recommendations from the task forces to throw progressives a little bit more crumbs is going to be what he's going to do. The reason anyone would vote for Joe Biden is because he's not Donald Trump. Period. End of story. So you don't have to create this false appeal that's not there. And we want to make sure that Trump doesn't appoint another Supreme Court justice. You can make the case for Joe Biden without forcing progressives to show our cards and admit that we're willing to water down the policies that we support rather than, holding strong. Him just not being Donald Trump is probably enough for most people. But to me, when I see, this attempt to throw crumbs to progressives, I just feel insulted. It puts us in a worse negotiating position later on when we actually do have power, because we're already showing the establishment that we're more than willing to water down our own message. And it's all around, I think, harmful. So this didn't produce anything. I mean, we'll have to wait and see, right? I mean, maybe Joe Biden will say, wow, I really like these recommendations. I'm going to adopt X, Y, and Z. But at the end of the day, Joe Biden is Joe Biden. Like, these recommendations mean nothing if Joe Biden himself doesn't actually change. And if they recommend something that he thinks is a little bit too extreme, he could just unilaterally dismiss it. So it's not really that inspiring to me. Like, if Joe Biden truly wanted to reach out to the left, this task force isn't necessarily the way to do that. He could just offer us policy concessions that he knows we want, right? But I mean, in terms of Bernie Sanders, I get that he doesn't want to be blamed for Donald Trump getting reelected, and he shouldn't and won't. But this is not the way to do it. It feels disingenuous. It feels manipulative. You don't have to try to lie to us and get us to think that Joe Biden is more progressive than he is in actuality. Joe Biden is appealing to people because he's not Donald Trump, and that's it. He's not progressive. We know exactly what we're getting with Joe Biden. Maybe a Supreme Court appointee that isn't extreme, right? Isn't some far-right goon like Brett Kavanaugh. But what we do know is that this unity task force isn't going to move Biden, because if he were moved at all, don't you think that a pandemic would have moved him on healthcare? If a pandemic doesn't get him to change his mind on healthcare, for example, then I don't think that a task force's recommendation is. So, I feel like I'm a Debbie Downer here. I don't want people to be like, overly doomish and gloomish about this, but I just feel like there are better ways to affect change. There are better routes that the left can take to influence people in power, and I feel like this is the least productive, if not harmful, way at going about doing that. Hi everyone, I have a great guest for you today. It is one half of The Serfs, comedian Lance. He's a Twitch streamer and a YouTuber, and I'm here to pick his brain about, a variety of topics. So Lance, thank you so much for coming on the program.
Thank you very much for having me. You're the first person to ever introduce me as a comedian, so...
Well, I think that it's definitely suitable. Your content is awesome. You're always making me laugh, and you're a comedian. I think that's accurate. Especially if someone like Dave Rubin calls himself a comedian, then, I mean, come on. I'm a comedian, you know what I mean? But no, I think that genuinely your content is great. I think it's awesome. Okay, so I feel like most of my audience has got to know by now about your channel and what you guys do. But if they don't, tell them what you're all about.
Okay, so we do, I guess, political comedy, which is kind of a misnomer, I suppose. We're kind of like I would equate us to being mimes in the political arena. Like we're pretty low on the totem pole, but we try to do our best. What we kind of did was like we would do long form documentaries on a whole bunch of different right wing ghouls. So like your Dave Rubins, your Stefan Molyneux's, your Jordan Petersons. I happen to be Canadian, so I guess part of our ethos is we're trying to undo the damage that so many Canadians have wrought upon America. And again, whether it's Stephen Crowder, Lawrence Southern, all of them, Stefan Molyneux, we're not sending our best. Gavin McInnes, I'm almost about to apologize, but I guess we got more prominent. We had about like 5,000 subscribers, and our YouTube channel got brigaded after we did a video on PewDiePie, and we got false flagged for malicious scams and something like that. Nothing that we were doing. Our channel got taken down, and then there was this really amazing online push to resurrect our channel from the grave, and including from big names like I'd never thought would interact with me, like your Sam Cedars or your H Bomber guy. Like they were all coming out of the woodwork, and we actually got I have it right here. I didn't prepare this prop. It's not like I always have it on hand or something, so this is not a bit, but I got it framed. This is an actual apology from the YouTubes. Because they never apologize.
Yeah,
like they're pretty renowned for never. But this is the actual tweet apology they made. So
I'm
pretty proud of this. This is a cherished item.
That is a frame-worthy item. Like they never take responsibility. And I will say, I'm embarrassed to admit that I actually didn't find out about your guys' channel until you were taken down by YouTube. And then
that's totally fine.
once I heard about it, then I also was upset by this. And then once it came back, I kind of like binged some of your guys' content, and it's great. But since you're here, I wanted to get your take on something because we kind of have breaking news. Like it won't be breaking by the time that most people see this, but it is breaking as of now. So we heard that friend of the show, Dave Rubin.
My brain is still in recovery mode from taking in so many high-level important ideas.
Has made an endorsement. He will be voting for Donald Trump in November. Now, I know you're going to be shocked by this. You've been following Dave Rubin. Wow. I've been following Dave Rubin.
To him? He was such a progressive before.
he was a classical liberal, and he's voting for Donald Trump. So any thoughts on this?
I, for one, am, I don't know, floored. I did not expect this, I mean, after Dave Rubin has put so much effort into cultivating this, deeply refined left-wing progressive technique, I guess it made sense after a while. I mean, so many copies of his book got burnt. And there's only so many book burnings you can attend before you're like, there's something wrong with the radical left. They've gone too far. And I think that's, facetiousness aside, everyone's done with the grift, right? Like we understand what's happening now. Like he's decidedly making his money because that's where it's paying him the best. I do find it kind of strange with Dave Rubin, though, that he's got an enormous amount of hypocrisy right now. I mean, not like more than usual, but he seems to be on the side of like, it's the left that's always doing the id poll, and it's the left that has to always talk about identity politics. I have yet to see him in the last like maybe 5 or 6 interviews where he doesn't talk about being gay. Like It's always like, and me, a gay man, and they don't bake me a cake, and I'm fine with that. I'm totally fine that Ben Shapiro won't bake me a cake. I'm okay with that. But I think it's kind of strange.
Yeah, that honestly bugs me so much because if you hate identity politics so much, then stop talking about identity politics. Like you can actually use your show to shift to a different conversation. But every second he is reminding people that he's gay. And we know what he's trying to do. He's trying to give himself like credibility, as I think during his Marianne Williamson interview, he tried to use that as like evidence that he's a liberal. I mean, it's laughable. He's a clown. And I will say that for the people who are thinking, well, this, grift has reached its logical conclusion, he's not going to go further. I'm calling it now. In like a year or two, the grift will go even further depending on like where the conservative movement goes. And he may go full evangelical to where he like announces that he's no longer homosexual and we meet his new girlfriend, Alice. Like this is where it's heading.
She's helped me so much. She cured me. He's actually what was I going to say? He's actually already evangelical. You're halfway right? Like he's already renounced his atheism.
That's
he's not
true.
doing that anymore. Yeah. So yeah,
that's true.
It was a matter of time.
Yeah.
Okay.
I need to stay caught up on 2024 for sure. I need to stay caught up on my Dave Rubin news. I get most of my Dave Rubin news from like people on Twitter randomly shitting on him, but also from Michael Brooks and your show as well, because I think you really keep me in the loop, and you provide me with content to where if he says something like just stupider than usual, then it's like, Okay, I gotta jump in. I mean, it's easy because it's like this is the low-hanging fruit, but it's shocking that so many people fall for the grift. It's infuriating to me that someone like him has over 1 million subscribers, but like lefties are just scraping by. You know what I mean? Like, because the algorithm buries our content. So it's a little bit of salt, to be honest, but at the same time,
have you noticed that a lot lately? Like with the Humanist Report?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So I just looked, and over the last 28 days, 8% of overall searches have been like suggested videos, which used to be like the majority. And, you know, part of it is, sure, maybe it's because the election is over and people kind of like tune out of politics. I don't necessarily blame them. So I'm not removing my own culpability here, but it's definitely a change to the algorithm. Because, I mean, if you look at new channels like Christo Avalis, for example, a great Canadian, you guys sent a phenomenal one there. Like, he should be at 100,000 by now, you know, and 4 years ago, had he been making the same type of content, I think that he would be past, you know, 100,000. People like David Dole would be past 500,000. So it's definitely, it's frustrating to see the way that YouTube is suppressing these types of news channels. And like, if you aren't really sure what I'm talking about, so I'm assuming that people who are watching this consume mostly indie media and left-wing channels. But if you look in your recommended tab to the left, you know, you're going to see MSNBC, Fox News more often than not now. And that's really, you know, YouTube prioritizing who they deem as, you know, authoritative sources. And once they kind of made that shift, it hurt all of left-wing news channels. And, you know, there are some who are still able to thrive. We kind of have these phases, at least on my channel, where we just see like 10,000 new subs in like a couple of weeks, and then it goes back down to like 0 on average. But, you know, it's just a lot more difficult now. It's harder for the up-and-comers, and it's more difficult for people who have an audience already to grow that audience. So, you know, when you see people like Dave Rubin and right-wingers thrive, the alt-right in particular, you know, people like Sargon of Akkad, it irritates me. Like, it pisses me off, you know, because there's so much going on that happens to the left that nobody talks about.
I think there is one thing to be said about the fact that the left, especially what is so-called quote-unquote breadtube, was really concerned with doing deeply researched documentaries, right? Like, that's what we used to do as well. And like, I still love it, like the long-form documentary, but it's a very long process, right? Like, it's obviously, like, we want to bring the biggest facts to the plate. Like, I know the left gets accused of feelings over facts, but like, if you look at the amount of work that goes into an H-Bomber guy or like a philosophy tube video and these really long form ones, right? Like, it's endless amounts of citations and sources and stuff like that. And 1 month, like one upload a month, does not compare to someone like Sargon of Akkad, who and Tim Pool actually was one of the ones who really weaponized this. They would film just a 2-hour stream where Tim Pool is allowed to speak about anything, and I do mean anything. I don't know if you watch his live shows. Like, they are just they are performance art of the highest level. It's him and his partner Weed Lord, and the two of them are there, and they can just talk about, like, I've never seen a more unhinged, uncohesive line of thought come out of a human than a 2-hour like Tim Pool podcast. Like, the topic could start out talking about, hey, Donald Trump is thinking about building the wall. Within maybe 30 seconds, they'll be talking about Chinese viruses, and then 15 seconds later, the moon. And like, it all seems like as if neither of them are, like, I don't know, at all appalled by what is happening or even taken aback. Like, it's a very good 1-2 combination. But anyways, my point of all this being, because I'm starting to do what I'm accusing him of, is that they will take this 2-hour broadcast and then clip it into 4 uploads for the day. So there'll be 4 Tim Pool uploads that day, and that'll just game the algorithm like no one's business, because they're going to have very inflammatory thumbnails and highlights, right? Like, Obama is secretly a socialist, confirmed, right? And then the next one will be, you know, Alex Jones proven right about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Thumbnails, pictures, red text. And that's enough for people to be like, okay, I guess I'll try to click on it. Enough people start doing that. The algorithm starts to feed into it. And then, you know, it gets to the point now where I can watch one Jordan Peterson video, and the entire right side of my bar is going to be nothing but like everything from Nick Fuentes to Jared Taylor to Stefan Molyneux. Not Stefan Molyneux anymore, but yeah, that was the way.
Yeah, and that kind of gets into a conversation that I wanted to have with you, because I think that you are basically an expert on the field of the alt-right and this pipeline, because it's really prevalent, and more so than people think. So Stefan Molyneux, or Stefan Molyneux.
I do have my official certificate right here at the school of alt-rhetoric.
That's great. That's great. So I think it was last week or the week before, where Stefan Molyneux was banned from YouTube. He was also banned from Twitter subsequently as well. And I wanted to get your take on deplatforming, because for me, I kind of feel like my position on this has been almost a 180. Like at first, I was very, I wasn't against deplatforming unequivocally, but I was very touchy on the subject because the way that YouTube, uses their algorithm, it almost never hits the intended targets, right? So like the first wave of demonetization led to LGBTQ plus channels being demonetized. And that was really, that scared me just because as a gay person, like when I was coming out, I watched so many coming out videos, and to think that that type of content would be discouraged, that was like genuinely harmful to me. So, it made me kind of do a double take about the intended result of deplatforming. But at the same time, I've evolved to the point where, just because YouTube is stupid and incompetent doesn't necessarily mean that they shouldn't follow their own terms and conditions with regard to hate speech. And on top of that, the left functionally over the course of the last couple of years, as we've kind of alluded to, we've been deplatformed in a way. Like, I'm not going to claim that we've been fully deplatformed, but we've been suppressed by this algorithm. So I don't necessarily feel the need to defend the right on, the basis of free speech, when one, they don't ever defend us, and two, we're already kind of the ones being deplatformed. So if I'm going to go to bat for anyone, I want it to be us. So I wanted to get your take on this and the deplatforming of Stefan Molyneux, because if anyone deserves to be deplatformed, I think it'd be a white supremacist like him who's explicitly racist.
Mm-hmm. And Richard Spencer as well, I think, was
taken
off a second time. Well,
That's
maybe
true.
a third time. He pops up, and same with Nick Fuentes. Nick Fuentes got taken down, I think, like maybe a month and a half ago, and then he pops back up in these new kind of pseudo channels where you're like, well, that's clearly Nick Fuentes again trying to pop back up on it. In my opinion, honestly, I think that my guiding star on this is kind of like I try to keep it at the levels of what we deem to be hate speech within the country. So I am completely for and this is, I'm going to say this like unironically, the marketplace of ideas, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the whole Dave Rubin philosophy, like, we should have a free marketplace of ideas where the dial get turned up to 11. And all, like, I like that. Well, I like that idea that we should allow people with opposing views to me, to be on the platforms. I'm totally fine with that. And I stop at, is it going to be like direct targeted harassment? So for someone like Alex Jones, because he's kind of the classic example, right? Alex Jones is actively targeting the parents of families who died in Sandy Hook. And he did it to the point that the parents were getting harassed to such a degree that one of the fathers committed suicide. That is, to me, a very clear, cut and dry example. If I owned one of these tech companies, cut him out, right? He's causing direct harm to individuals, where it becomes a bit of a gray area is what if you have someone on there, say like Ben Shapiro, for example, who intentionally misgenders people because he doesn't feel that it's something that's wrong. Whereas you can make a very strong argument in my mind that intentionally misgendering members of the trans community can contribute to an atmosphere that, is explainable in the really high rates of suicide. That it's because of their vilification as a whole in society. So if we have a person on there who's constantly saying like, you're not a she, you're a he, right? And this is just the way that everyone should, there is a danger to that as well. Is it targeted though? Is it towards a specific individual or doxing? That would be another thing that I would say, like, you should have a zero tolerance policy for those kind of things. I think ultimately, if I'm being totally intellectually honest, I don't think the left is intentionally suppressed by YouTube. Just like I don't think the right is intentionally censored by Twitter, unlike what Tim Pool likes to say. I don't think that's the case. I think all these tech companies follow one guiding principle, and that's money. Like that's ultimately what they care about. The algorithm is looking to what can keep people and their eyes on content for as long as possible. And the right wing just had a very big head start against the left because the left wasn't using YouTube as this kind of like megaphone, right? They were fine with all the other forms of social media that they were dominating. Meanwhile, the right wingers were cultivating this really, really powerful force on YouTube until they became a force to be reckoned with. I remember Paul Joseph Watson was one of the first people to say, like, we're absolutely dominating this platform, and he wasn't wrong. And now it's to a point where, again, if you search one or two videos, boom, it pops up all over, right? You have that really thing. And you're also right about the fact that I think just news in general, especially because you talk about mainstream news, right? Like you report on mainstream stories, you report on Joe Biden and stuff like that. So you are getting suppressed by very safe, profitable corporations like your MSNBCs, your CNN. That's just easy for them to put up there and to promote because they know they don't have to worry about it. Whereas, maybe Mike might say something that is a little bit controversial, right? You might make a video montage about Joe Biden, or you might make one about how Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is not a communist devil, like she's actually like pretty reasonable, things like that. That might not be as safe as just MSNBC doing what they always do, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. And I am glad that you brought that up about, this not being intentional. This is just about money. I think that the left, if they were able to draw in the money in terms of like ad revenue that the right does, then maybe the algorithm would ease up. But this isn't something that, you know, I don't believe that there's like a bunch of YouTube executives like, let's target the left. Like it's totally just, you know, they make right. Oh, totally. You know, they make changes to the algorithm, and they make these changes exclusively on the basis of what will increase their profits, you know, maximize revenue. So it's not anything that's nefarious. It's just something that we're dealing with. And I'm not even going to suggest that this is a permanent thing. You know, maybe it's just now they change the algorithm all the time. And you can tell when they change the algorithm because you'll be like riding high. And like I'll put out videos that get like 50,000 views, you know, every single day, and then all of a sudden it just falls off a cliff. Then I realize they changed the algorithm, and I think that this is the consensus that everyone has acknowledged, that these are due to really quiet changes to the algorithm. They don't necessarily let us know about all of these changes. We just kind of have to roll with the punches. But yeah,
there's definitely a political agenda to them demonetizing LGBTQ content, though. Like there's no question about that, right? And that was the big reason that I left YouTube to stream on Twitch instead, because I had interviewed a non-binary individual, and I noticed that right after I put their interview up on the site, instantly demonetized. And also it was demonetized as I was broadcasting it, and the thing, I forget what the pop-up was, but it was something along the lines of like, you know, the controversial content or something. And afterwards I was like, it's happening again and again. It's happening when I interviewed a lesbian. It happened shortly thereafter when I interviewed another non-binary individual. And so I was like, there's a pattern here. And clearly they think that these topics are controversial, which is astounding because YouTube takes such a big corporate stance during Pride Month, right?
Yeah.
They're really, really big on like our logos are the rainbow, and we care about this, and we're going to highlight all these, you know, various different actors and stuff like that.
Yeah, you're right about that. And I will say, though, there is a good sign, because anytime that I've put up anything with LGBTQ or trans in the tags, like I just expect that's going to be demonetized. And I think a lot of us have that expectation, but we kind of just roll with the punches because we don't necessarily base what we're going to put out on what will or won't be demonetized. But I think it was like last summer, I put out a video that was very explicitly like, you know, trans rights. It was about transgender rights. I can't remember the particular topic. I think it was maybe like a Trump thing that he did with regard to trans rights, and it didn't get demonetized. And so I think I even tweeted about that. I'll try to find the tweet to put it on screen. I can't remember specifically. And it was so shocking. It was like, oh, well, maybe this is a change. If this is up and it's not getting demonetized, maybe they're reversing that policy. But then again, I put up, you know, a video on LGBTQ rights a month later, and it does get hit. So it's tough. You know, for me, I don't necessarily care about the money aspect. I think a lot of creators acknowledge that demonetization is just something that we deal with now, but we have Patreon to supplement that. So it's not the biggest issue. What really sucks is the fact that when you get limited ads, that also means you get limited reach in terms of like who's going to see your video, less recommendations. So it's kind of like this snowball effect where less potential people who would like your content, who maybe would be a patron, they don't get to see that. So it does suck, and I hope that it does change. We're completely hopeless, you know, in terms of like what we can do. We're just up to the whims of YouTube unless there's a sizable enough competitor that comes along. But hey, you know, we do what we can. So I wanted to ask you, because this is kind of a spicy topic, and we'll try to sanitize the more controversial components, but I think it's a discussion that's interesting, and I haven't commented on this. I'm not sure if you have either, but Nathan J. Robinson of Current Affairs, he posted an article, two articles. This is spicy, it is. So the first article that he posted was, "Isn't right-wing populism just fascism?" And he kind of directly takes a shot at Rising on the Hill, over a book that I actually have.
Okay. How is it?
So I haven't read it yet. I bought it because I really like Crystal Ball. I think she's sharp. But part of the reason why I bought this is because apparently there's an explanation of what the new right is. Now, my understanding, maybe this is too simplistic, is that right-wing populism isn't a thing. Like, I have never thought of populism in terms of right-wing or left-wing. It's just whatever is popular, mostly economic policy, right? So I don't know what right-wing populism means. To me, I always thought if you're a right-wing populist, that's usually you're just a fascist. So I was hoping to kind of get an explanation, and I haven't read it yet. So maybe Sagar goes on to explain what he means by the new right and right-wing populism. But Nathan J. Robinson's argument basically is that he doesn't really lay that out. And so right-wing populism is essentially just fascism, because think about who we see as right-wing, quote-unquote, populists. You know, Jair Bolsonaro. Yeah, Tucker Carlson. Donald Trump. And they're all fascists. So the question is, is right-wing populism a thing, and how does the left respond to that? Because his argument is kind of directed at Crystal Ball in the sense that he thinks that she's kind of enabling this type of fascism by, one, not challenging it, and two, by kind of sanitizing it, right? Because Nathan J. Robinson admits that he agrees with what Saagar is saying 80% of the time. But the thing is that, if you allow yourself to just talk about discussions where you agree, where if you narrow that parameters, you're kind of not really getting the full sense of that person and how problematic they may be. So for like an extreme example, if I were to talk to David Duke about just cats and food, I'm sure that,
it would seem... love to see that conversation. It would be so weird.
It'd be a little scary because he scares me.
I don't like black cats, I'll tell you.
Totally. Like if we had a conversation about that, it'd be benign. I wouldn't know that he's a white supremacist. We'd agree seemingly on everything. But if we, widen that scope and we started talking about identity politics, politics in general, then it would be problematic. So, the argument, not to kind of put words in Nathan J. Robinson's mouth, but what I took away from this is that Crystal Ball is kind of helping to present this fake illusion of, right-wing populism, when in actuality it's not a real thing. It's just fascism, and we shouldn't enable these people. Now, I don't know what the implication is. I don't know if he thinks that we should kick Saagar off of the hill. I don't think that's what he's implying. Maybe he just wants Crystal Ball to challenge him more. But I thought that it was a thought-provoking piece, because this is something that I've kind of grappled with. I'm not sure how many people remember this, but back in, was it 2018 or 2019, me and Kyle Kulinski kind of had a similar discussion on the Progressive Voice show, but about Joe Rogan, right? And, whether or not he is acceptable, because I take issue with his stance on trans rights and whatnot.
Oh, absolutely.
So,
that's probably his most problematic thing.
Absolutely.
I kind of feel he's, I'm not going to get too derailed with this, but he's kind of a Rorschach test for whoever his guest is. Because I find when he has Cornel West on the show, you will have just an incredible elucidation on the history of socialism, and you'll be in America, and you'll be like, this is a beautiful hour of my life. I'm very happy I spent this time. He has Ben Shapiro on, and he's a transphobic piece of shit. And you're like, oh, well, that was a terrible hour and a half. I'll never get back, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's kind of like a Dave Rubin, but not as bad as Dave Rubin. He pushes back sometimes, like the Candace Owens interview on climate change. That's a great example. I think I even talked about that on my program. But, it's just a matter of how does the left respond? And I think that Kyle Kulinski does make a really solid point in that, if you think that people like Dave Rubin, or excuse me, not Dave Rubin, but Joe Rogan or Crystal Ball are in a way inadvertently offering you a type of pipeline to the alt-right, then, having them, offer left perspectives could potentially be a pipeline out of the alt-right as well. So, it's complicated, and I think this is a really nuanced and somewhat messy subject. And I wanted to get your take on this because I feel like you really have a solid understanding of the alt-right, and how people kind of get trapped in that pipeline. So, what is your take on this? Is the left being a little bit too cancel culture-y, or do you think there's actually something there with Nathan J. Robinson's argument?
So I guess if we took it, what's the classical definition of fascism? You're basically combining economic populism, right? That's what Hitler was doing. So ideas that are very social in origin, where we're talking about socialized medicine, things like that, for example, with right-wing or far-right conservatism, combine the two, right? I mean, even far past, I'm not going to call the right wing as far fascist as they were. But so Are we seeing that in someone like Tucker Carlson? I think even before Tucker Carlson, you were starting to see that with people like, say, Alex Jones, who was constantly talking about, instead of, they would usually have a couple of dog whistles here, but it would talk about the globalists, right? It's the globalists and the elites, and it's all of them right off in the corner or something like that. He's talking about that, and it's all coded for the international bankers and in brackets, all that kind of stuff. But they're constantly vilifying this idea of there is something external. And I mean, if you're on the left, you'll understand it. It happens to be there's no secret to any of this. The people who control the levers of power happen to be the rich, right? The quote unquote elites. We know who they are. You have to look at who's the Fortune 500, right? We know who the billionaires are. We know what they own. We know what assets they have. We know the oil companies, all that kind of stuff. We understand that, but they will try to take that same idea, because everyone experiences alienation, right? Everyone's having trouble finding employment, even worse now with COVID, 40 million extra Americans unemployed. But you've got this idea where everyone is experiencing this alienation. And now we've got this section of the right that's tapping into those same kind of things and selling them and repackaging them with right-wing populism as well. That's what I know right-wing populism isn't a thing. I agree with your statement there, right? But that's what I would say is quote-unquote right-wing populism. And in the case of Crystal Ball, and during Bernie Sanders' campaign, I was a huge fan of her. And it was really nice seeing maybe just like a mainstream Sunday morning, like Good Morning America style show that was actually talking about points with Bernie Sanders, right? Whereas now I cannot stand it. Like even if I hear that little jingle, that like I actually get like, a visceral, like fearful, like I can feel my skin crawling, because I think it's come out now at this point. I think one of the biggest producers or founders on the show happens to be deeply invested in the oil companies of the US. And I've read a number of articles. I think even The Intercept did an article on this, how the Hill exists to kind of sow dissemination between the progressive movement and the liberal movement of the United States. So there might be an argument there. I'm not going to go too tinfoil hat. I was just making fun of Alex Jones 2 seconds ago, right? But but the idea then that we have this show in which she's starting to say, and I noticed she was saying this a lot before she got called out on it, that Tucker Carlson is right about this. And it usually starts with that preface, right? Like, I just want to say this. He's an awful person, all right? He's a white nationalist. We get it. He's a mouthpiece. But he's not wrong about blank. And there seem to be a lot of those segments, right? And Tucker was actually right about this. Tucker's right about this. And yes, he's a bad person, but it is true that there is these global elites that control the levers of power. And to Crystal Ball, I'm sure she thinks that it's the rich. I'm sure she thinks that it's, again, the elites actually are who the elites are, right? Like I said, the millionaires, the billionaires who control most of the levers of power in the United States. But you can't repackage what Tucker says for the left. That's where the danger comes in, and that's what I would agree with this idea. And maybe that is, I read Nathan J. Robinson's article. I haven't read the book that you have in your hands, but that's where I agree with Nathan, that you can't normalize Tucker and his ideas. You have to consistently call them out for what they are, because otherwise it's very insidious.
Yeah, and one of the issues that Nathan J. Robinson also brings up is that there's this explicit assumption in the book that it would be beneficial for the left if we teamed up with the right. If the populist left and the populist right kind of form this, economic alliance, then we can get a lot of things done. And I think that is something that I unequivocally reject, because I think that if you want to form a coalition that makes sense, we need a rainbow coalition. I think that Fred Hampton kind of, he led the way on that, but it has to be an anti-racist coalition, because you can't disaggregate, the race issues from the class issues. So you can't throw people of color and trans people under a bus and say, well, we're going to team up with them for these economic issues, but you're going to have to wait by the side. Like, it doesn't work that way, because these things are inextricably linked. So that's one of the things that, had I read the book, I would have also been turned off by that, because I absolutely don't like this notion of teaming up with, the populist right, because I don't think that there is a populist right. And I am glad that you brought up the Tucker Carlson thing. Like, he's a bad person, but like, that still normalizes someone who is very clearly a white supremacist. And, by trying to point out the good point that he makes, and since he's so nefarious, it's great that he made a good point, positive reinforcement. Sure, I believe in positive reinforcement, but this is an actor who's very intelligent, who knows exactly what he's doing. He throws you a couple of crumbs with regard to economic issues, but if you accept what he has, once he gets you in, then you're pulled into a very nefarious, explicitly white supremacist agenda. And maybe, he doesn't convince you right away, but as you listen to him more because you were hooked by his economic policy statements, well, then maybe, you start opening your mind a little bit more to white supremacy. So I think it's a dangerous path to go down. And I think that there really is, like, I don't want to say that, the show The Rising is awful, because I also watched it a lot, during the primaries, but I think that we do have to be careful as lefties to not allow snakes like, Tucker Carlson to be legitimized by us, either wittingly or unwittingly. And like, part of it is, I feel like it should be just on its face laughable, because you have Sagar Enjeti, who's the co-host of The Hill Rising. He's a Trump supporter, and he rails against neoliberal Democrats. But Trump is a neoliberal. Like, he ran as a populist, but he governs as a neoliberal. So how do you not abandon people who aren't living up to your populist principles? So to me, it seems like a Trojan horse to, the alt-right. And that's why I think that there is something to, Nathan J. Robinson's point here. But I don't want to discount, what
he's not the only one making that critique either, by the way. It
Sure.
hasn't just been coming from Nathan J. Robinson. I've seen a lot of other figures on the left, not just in relation to Crystal in particular, but just the idea of the left starting to embrace elements of that right-wing populism.
Totally.
Whatever you want to say, quote unquote right-wing populism.
Yeah, and I think we have to reject it, and we have to be very vocal about it, because if you give them an inch, they take a mile, because they are very, very strategic, and they're savvy. Like, people nowadays, you're not going to find someone just say, "Hey guys, I'm a Nazi. Here's a swastika." Like, they use code words. Like, I think that ContraPoints had a great video.
Right?
Exactly. So I mean, you have to not get duped by them, in other words. But at the same time, I want to bring up Kyle Kalinske, who made a good response video to this, to where he says, you have to acknowledge that the average, like, layperson, the normies, they're not going to necessarily be as keen to these things. And by criticizing people like Crystal Ball, it seems like we're being, like, overly cancelly or whatever. So it's tough. I feel like we're walking a fine line, but there's so much at stake.
I have no desire to cancel her. Like, I don't really say I'm not a cancel culture person in general, because I don't think it works. I don't think there's such a thing. If it works, J.K. Rowling wouldn't be allowed to tweet anymore.
Tucker Carlson wouldn't have a show.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think cancel culture is a real thing.
Yeah.
Like, when it comes, actually, can I just quick sidebar? What was your thoughts on Kalinski's latest defense of Stefan Molyneux? Because he's coming out as a bit of a free speech absolutist right now. Like, do you agree with that take?
I don't know what he said. I'm assuming that he said that Stefan Molyneux shouldn't be deplatformed, but I would disagree with that.
It's the idea that it's a slippery slope, and that it's only a matter of time before I think he said, like, you think it's okay when they're coming for people on the far right. What happens when they come for people on the far left? And then in my head, I was like, well, I can't really think of what the far left is. I mean, I think maybe his example was Farrakhan or something, and I was like, I don't consider him in any way to be a leftist. I think I consider him an anti-Semite, and I think he's a very isolated example. And he's been deplatformed, so I don't think it applies to anyone.
Yeah. No, my take on that is I kind of had a conversation with Kyle about this during the Crowder Mazza situation, where Steven Crowder was demonetized, and I was all for that. But I'm not worried about them coming for the left, because we're already dealing with it. Like, they have functionally deplatformed a lot of lefties, as we kind of talked about earlier. So it's not like it's not the biggest issue. But for me, like, the way that I think about this is, you have to be, how do I put this? You want to make sure that you're not allowing people like Stefan Molyneux to spread their hatred, because you can defend his free speech rights if you're a free speech absolutist, and I think that that's fine if you are principled and you're adhering to that. But you have to acknowledge, and I'm sure Kyle Kalinske does, that this is someone who would never defend your free speech rights. And fascists, if you allow them the free speech rights to gain popularity and power, then they will deplatform everyone else and not support free speech. I think was it Richard Spencer who said he doesn't support free speech absolutism or something to that effect.
Definitely a huge fan of Tucker Carlson too, right? I think him, Jared Taylor, David Duke, they all think that Tucker Carlson speaks for them. They're like, oh, he's our best voice in the mainstream media happens to be Tucker Carlson. He speaks the truth. Yeah.
Makes sense.
Here's a good quote for you. I don't know if you've ever heard this, but I think it was Zizek who was talking about how a little bit of dogmatism is actually a good thing. And he's like, we can determine as a society, he's like, you wouldn't argue with someone, I should probably be, you wouldn't, but you wouldn't argue with someone about the merits of rape, right? Like, you wouldn't have that debate. So there's nothing to be had there. No, it doesn't matter what their argument is. He's like, well, it feels good or whatever. That's a non-starter. We know we can cut off the bar. So, like, a little bit of dogmatism within society can actually be a defining characteristic of the level to which we've reached. So I think that is okay to an extent, right? I don't think that every single person who says something, like, I'm very further on the free speech train than I think most people on the left are, and I usually stop at the limits of hate speech, right? If it's going to directly damage or harm people, that's where I'm like, okay, I don't think your freedom of speech can also be limiting someone else's freedom of speech in the exact opposite direction. You just don't think of it that way. Sorry, I've done the Tim Pool thing. We're so far off your topic. But back to Kalinske and Crystal Ball. I think she was aware of it as well, because she apologized. She issued a video, or sorry, I don't know if she directly apologized, but it was more of a just like, I know what everyone's saying. I've read the articles and everything, and to this extent, like, I am not praising Tucker Carlson. He's a horrible person. He's a white nationalist. Let's get that out. It's a non-starter kind of thing.
Yeah, and I will say, just for the record, I like Crystal Ball. I'm not assuming like malintent in criticizing, because I've also done horrible things on my channel. You know, it's all about growing, right? We're human beings, we're imperfect. Like, I've platformed H.A. Goodman, and I kind of like attribute my channel to his success in a way, and now he's a MAGA chat. So that's something that I really think about. Like, how am I vetting these people who I bring on my channel and whatnot? And to Kyle Kulinski's point, I think that what he says, like his principle stance on this...
I'm going to get you so canceled.
I'm going to be... I am. I've already been canceled, so...
I'm going to take the biggest 180, Mike. You're going to be like, God damn it, why did I have Lance on?
Fucking Lance. Now he's a Trump support... No. No, I really like Kyle Kulinski's stance, even if I disagree, because he is so principled when it comes to free speech, and like he sticks to it. And I wish that I were as consistent as him on this issue, but my stance has changed a little bit. And I kind of feel like that free speech absolutism that he champions, it only works if we all have the same agreement on free speech. Like, if people like Stefan Molyneux and Dave Rubin actually were the free speech champions that they say they are, then I think that stance could work. But because they're not, because they would take away our free speech rights, that's why I think it doesn't necessarily work in practice.
My thoughts on that, though, is that, like, I am someone who, I'm on the same page as you. I am completely fine with apologizing. Maybe it's the Canadian in me, right? But like, I'm completely fine with apologizing. I'm fine with taking things down. Like, part of being what a quote unquote progressive is to me is that I'm constantly changing and evolving my beliefs based on the information as is proposed to me, right? Like, if you had told me 10 years ago about aspects of the trans community, I would have had no idea what you're talking about. I would have been like, what, isn't that just people dressing up in drag or something like that? You know, like, I wouldn't have. And like, obviously I try, like anyone else, you try to read and you learn, you better yourself. So the idea of just being like, I don't delete any tweets I've ever made, I don't do anything, because I want a permanent leisure. And like, to a certain extent, like, I wish that Kyle Kulinski would take down the old tweets where he calls people the F slur, for example, as an insult, right? And I understand that he's of the mind where he doesn't have to change anything he does. But to me, that's kind of the same thing that Trump does. You know, like, Trump never apologizes. Trump never backs down. So do most strongmen. You know, it's kind of this absolutism in which, like, I never want to show. Please don't think I'm comparing the two of them. I think, like, I like Kyle Kulinski. Like,
right.
I've interviewed.
We love Kyle. We don't like Trump.
Yeah, I'm not trying to juxtapose the two of them back to back. But what I am trying to say is that, like, I think there's no shame or problem in either admitting when you're wrong or even trying to better yourself as a content creator, right? Like, you know, take your stuff down, take a video down. Like, I did it very recently. I was debating a right-wing race realist by the name of Actual Justice Warrior, and he had called out a video I did on Ferguson and Mike Brown. And before he even did a video on me and my, take on the Mike Brown incident, I was already getting feedback from my own community where they were saying this was a really bad take, Lance, because I was kind of just downplaying the aspects because I hadn't read the Department of Justice report. I didn't know like all the facts behind it. And I was just saying, like, well, Mike Brown he was walking while black, and yet another case of just police brutality and all this kind of stuff. And everyone was like, you should actually be more informed on this, right? It's going to look worse long term on both you and the left if you just try to have this absolutist, like, black people are being persecuted, because they are. There's an incredibly huge problem in the United States when it comes to the black community and the way they are treated, systemic racism, historical racism, all this kind of stuff. But to do this in this one case is bad. So yes, based on that feedback, I took the video down. And then because he made a video on me, he actually thought that he had credit for this or something, and we ended up doing like a very spicy debate afterwards. But again, I have no problem with that. Like, and I never will. Like, you'll probably find me down the road apologizing for things that I'm saying in this interview right now. But but there's no problem with that to me. I think I don't see that as a sign of weakness. I see it as a sign of growth.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I'm not sold on this idea that cancel culture is a thing, because people, like I said, like, if cancel culture were as powerful as people make it out to be, then Tucker Carlson wouldn't have a show. A lot of people would be canceled, but like, growth is important. Like, I think that there's this assumption with this cancel culture rhetoric, to kind of shift gears into cancel culture, that the left is uncompromising and they're never willing to accept growth. But that the opposite is true. Like, I totally agree with you. Like, we are pro-growth. Like, if you're going to grow and change, I think that's really important. Like, Cult of Dusty is one of the best people to talk to on this. I haven't talked to him yet, but he's someone who I was subscribed to him a long time ago, like in the early 2010s, but I actually unsubscribed because the content that he made a particular video about Black Lives Matter that I disagreed with. I thought it was a bad take. So I unsubscribed, and like, he's back now, he's streaming, and he talks about all these bad takes I had, they were terrible. I said this, I said that, and I disagree with them. And so I think that that's really phenomenal. That's beautiful. And for me, if I were to go back to like the early Humanist Report catalog, I would probably find a lot that I disagree with, because the thing is that as human beings, we're constantly growing. And if you're not growing, then I think that's bad. Like nobody wants to admit that they were wrong. Nobody wants to back down. Everybody wants to be able to commend themselves for holding strong on something, on a particular position throughout the years. But that's not realistic for everything. So I think that, encouraging growth is important. And cancel culture, like we keep seeing it, like there's this letter from Harper, the letter as it's deemed, with
we can
name.
get into that.
I saw a video from David Dole on this, and he basically said everything that I wanted to. So I kind of feel like, okay, well, it's out there, it's in the universe. But I mean, like, cancel culture is not really an issue. It's more of a thing that is used in a way, I think, ironically to silence the left, right? Because like if you criticize someone like J.K. Rowling, for example, what is her first defense? Oh, well, this is cancel culture. Everyone's too PC. But it's like, well, you're not canceled though. You're a billionaire in your mansion, so you're not being canceled, and you're using cancel culture as a defense to shut down debate about your actions. So what is your take on cancel culture? Because I'm irritated whenever I hear the words, personally.
I think we're just going to be this is going to be an exercise in masturbation, I guess. I completely agree with you. Like I don't think cancel culture is a real thing. I think that like even someone like J.K. Rowling is going to, even if J.K. Rowling was deplatformed off of Twitter tomorrow for hate speech towards the trans community, she would still be a billionaire. She could start her own Twitter tomorrow if she wanted to, right? And I'm not even saying learn to code, but she has the money to start her entire social media company. I don't think it's a real thing, and I don't think it bears fruit in terms of like, where are the results? Can you give me examples of people who were canceled, right, as a part of cancel culture? I like, it seems to me like people just don't want to be held accountable, or they don't want to be called out for their shitty takes on Twitter. And by virtue of the platform, especially if you're a famous person, that's kind of what Twitter's going to be. I don't know about you. I don't know how often you actually check all the replies to a single tweet you have, but there's going to be half the human population probably hates you, right? In any given take, right? All the conservatives will hate you, right? Like all the alt-righters despise me. They're constantly telling me terrible things, and like that's just the virtue of the platform. That doesn't mean that I don't want to take information from, especially for someone like J.K. Rowling, who is getting feedback from her peers, right? From people she worked with, like what is it, Daniel Radcliffe,
right?
Just came out and just did the most beautiful, elegant little, like, you could just hear it as his delightfully whimsical voice, just coming out and made this whole post that was just so lovely to see. That was just like, I'm sorry that she's doing this, but at the same time, if you as a child took anything from these, please don't ever let that leave your heart. I hope it meant to you as much as it meant to us to create it, all that kind of stuff. But at the same time, trans women are women, trans men are men, and that's all there is to it, right? And that, sorry, my long-winded answer short, cancel culture is not real.
Yeah, no, and that's beautifully put, because I totally agree. Like what I see, like the discourse with regard to cancel culture for me can be like reduced down to someone getting backlash over a tweet. So they say, oh, well, I'm canceled. Or like if you put up a YouTube video with a bad take and it gets like majority dislikes, then you say, I've been canceled. But because you're still here. So have you really been canceled, though? I mean, it's not really a real thing. And in the instances where someone is like legitimately canceled and they lose their career, it's really rare. And it usually is legitimate, like Louis C.K. Like, I think that was probably a justified cancel, wouldn't most people say? You know what I mean? So it's overblown. And I think that really it's I don't know, it's sloppy discourse. It's intellectually lazy, in my opinion. So whenever I see like hysteria about cancel culture, I mean, you can point to instances of like a viral video leading to someone losing their job. And sure, you can debate whether or not that's something that we want in society. But overall, what we're really talking about with cancel culture, in terms of like the political discourse, is people with large platforms, people who are on national mainstream news, people with power and money. And you're not being canceled if we criticize you. They just want to put out shitty takes and not be criticized. But I mean, that you're canceling everyone else who wants to criticize you.
Let's use Louis as an example, because Louis, in my opinion, wasn't canceled in the same way that these people are saying they're canceled. Louis was accused of women of forcing them to watch him masturbate and locking them in rooms to perform those acts, and then admitted to it. And that was it. It wasn't like this long ongoing process where Louis said, like, the thing with all these comedians who are like, you can't even do comedy anymore. Like, I can't even say what I want to say. I'll be canceled instantaneously, blah, blah, blah. Sure, you can do comedy. You can do – have you seen Eric Andre's new special? It's got to be one of the most offensive comedy specials in a long time. And yet it's still not as bad as most of these other comedians' stuff because there's a point, right? Like, what is the punchline? The same thing with, like, the kind of shitty – Dave Chappelle, one of my favorite comedians, probably my favorite comedian, actually, if I'm being totally honest. His newer special is unfortunately on Netflix not that good, and just because it really feels like he's punching down, right? He's attacking members of the trans community, stuff like that, and there's not really a point to the punchline at the end of the day. The punchline at the end of the day wasn't like something that is actually going to be transformative. That actually makes me really think about a societal issue, like he used to do so beautifully. He was sublime at that, right? So in the case of Louis C.K., he's, even though he was quote unquote canceled by virtue of like he admitted to doing some pretty horrifying things, he still sells out comedy clubs. He still makes comedy specials. He's still, if he wanted to, I'm sure he could have a special on a non-Netflix-esque network. I'm sure he could get on a whole bunch of other TV shows if he really wanted to, right? Like, he hasn't effectively been silenced, you know? How about someone like Mel Gibson? You know, Mel Gibson has to be one of the most vile racists of our generation in terms of, like, he believes these horrifying things and is vocal about it. It's not like we have to think about whether or not Mel Gibson is a piece of shit. We have it on tape. Calling, saying you're going to get violated by a pack of N-words and things like that, right? I'm trying to keep it as PG. This is definitely not as bad as he put it, all the way to being incredibly anti-Semitic. He was nominated for an Academy Award a couple of years ago. You know, like, persona non grata, canceled Mel Gibson is nominated for an Academy fucking Award. Roman Polanski won an Academy Award after quote unquote, like, should he not be canceled? Like, he raped a 13-year-old. I think that's pretty canceled. I don't know. Like,
right?
Yeah,
no, I will say the people who are the most like anti-cancel culture, they are cancel culture, though. Like, I can't remember who, and I'll put it up on the screen. Megyn Kelly was railing against cancel culture previously, but all of a sudden she's tweeting at Nike and Disney because they just penned a deal with Colin Kaepernick. I mean, what is the goal of tagging them, trying to get him fired, obviously? So it's like cancel culture is a weapon that's being used disproportionately against the left. And, like, I think that you can debate the merits of cancel culture. In fact, since we're talking about this, I've got to plug the Some More News segment on this by Cody Johnson. It's like 40 minutes, but it's perfect. It is. But, I mean, cancel culture is being overblown, and it's being used as a weapon against the left to demonize the left, and it's just fucking bullshit. Like, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Who's the other example I was just thinking of? And now you've got me distracted by Cody Shoddy. I can't stop thinking about it.
Shout out to Cody Shoddy.
He's our lefty Charlie Kelly. It's not the one we deserve, but it's the one we need.
Yeah.
I don't know. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. We'll just keep talking.
Okay. I will plug, since we're talking about Cody Shoddy. Back in 2018, I was on the Creationist Cat channel with Benjamin Dixon and Cody Shoddy. I loved it, so check it out. It was one of my funnest collaborations, aside from this one, because I got to be like associated with like comedy, and I'm not very funny. Like, I'm kind of like this dry nerd. But they the video was awesome, so I'll plug that, and maybe I'll put a link to it if I could find the video. I'm sure it's still around.
And we're plugging Creationist Cat at the same time. So
yeah, Creationist
good
Cat
plugs
as well.
all around.
Yeah, and Benjamin Dixon also, who has a podcast daily, I think. That's phenomenal. We'll just like go through all the shout outs now. No, but since we're going through shout outs, let's go ahead and let's plug your channel, because my audience has got to subscribe to you. You have 2 YouTube channels, correct?
I do, yeah. So I basically wanted to emulate the Tim Pool strategy, like I told you. So I stream every day on Twitch. You can check that out, obviously, at twitch.tv/theserfstv. In fact, most of our social media is just at The Serfs TV. So if you go to twitter.com/theserfstv, Instagram/theserfstv, pornhub.com/theserfstv, you'll find every version of that. But then our new channel. Sorry.
Any OnlyFans on Serfs yet? Or Serfs on OnlyFans?
That one will be coming up soon. But then the other one is it's called The Serf Times. So it's just youtube.com/The Serf Times, and it is basically, I take my streams that I've done during the course of the day and I'll edit them into little teeny parcels and parsecs. I can speak nerd too. I love my Star Wars. But anyways, I would cut that into little pieces, and then I would put that up on the Serf Times. and it's astonishing how much that works. Like, I'm going to be totally honest with you. The Tim Pool model works for a reason. It's one of the reasons Vosh has grown so fast, so quickly. If there is one strategy I would tell the left to start emulating, is that. I mean, obviously, work on your craft, polish your stuff, make your stuff as entertaining as possible. Cultivate your own voice and find what works for you and all that kind of stuff. But in terms of trying to aggressively attack the YouTube algorithm and promote leftist stuff, that strategy does work. Like 10-minute plus videos into very catchy kind of like headline thumbnails, stuff like that. It is a really good strategy.
Yeah, that's good to know, because Vosh is, to his credit, he is blowing up on YouTube, which is really nice to see, because like that type of content before, like 5 years ago, that's like longer form, it wouldn't have a leg to stand on in YouTube. Like, you really were incentivized to make shorter videos, and I'm kind of still in that shorter video mode. But the longer format videos, especially if people like posting clips of live streams, it really does have like a ton of views. So that's really good to know. I kind of need to shake up my format. I haven't had a really big format change, but I kind of do a little bit of both here. Like, I'll do some shorter news videos, and then I'll do like my deep dives, which are like 10 plus minutes. But I kind of make videos for like, assuming whether or not I would want to watch them. And I usually aim for like 8 to 12 minutes. I think that's the sweet spot, because like you don't want it to be too short. Like, you want to finish your dinner if you're watching YouTube, but you don't want it to be too long, because they're supposed to be quick. But I think that really trying to grow is part of the process, so we can take back this algorithm from the alt-right. And I'm glad that you brought that up, because that is important for people to know, who are kind of like these up and comers who are trying to get their foot in the door, and it's really tough.
Yeah, I mean, the other piece of advice then I would give if we're doing this is to use solidarity, because that actually works quite a bit as well on YouTube. Like, combine with other content creators, collaborate as much as possible, promote each other. That's what the right was doing without even thinking about it, because I don't think they were thinking of it as solidarity. They were just thinking of it in terms of marketing principles, right? So your Dave Rubins had Joe Rogan on, your Joe Rogans had Stefan Molyneux on, your Stefan Molyneux had Jared Taylor, and then that's how the entire pipeline was created. But their cross-pollination that they were doing so very frequently does work, right? Because at the end of the day, it's about finding people. And right now, you and me have had this unbelievably, amazingly lovely interaction. And the people watching my stream, I'd say maybe like a handful of them are going to love you as well. And then a handful of them are just going to be like, yeah, that was nice, but like I'm okay. And the same thing vice versa, right? Some people are going to be watching me and they're going to be like, oh, I liked him, he was funny. Other people are going to be like, who is this like, complete moron on the show? But there is going to be like an overlap and a cross promotion. And I think that absolutely works. I think it's a good thing. Yeah,
definitely. I'm trying to commit to that more as well. It's tough because it's like you only have a finite amount of time, and I'm trying to do more candidate interviews. But I think that this cross-pollination really is the way to go, because if we want to create that type of pipeline, for lack of a better word, into the left circles, then you do have pipeline. To do this. Exactly. Like, you can't just have, the same 3 people that you watch. You have to be introduced to newer voices. And there's so many great people who are popping up on the left who are they have to be promoted. Like, it's a shame that they're not getting the attention that they deserve, given how much time, effort, and research, they put into these videos. So, like, I try to do my part to promote them, and, it's just kind of like a give and take. So, yeah, is there anything else?
Well, I think my daily streams are, I usually get 2 or 3 clips lined up every single day. It'll be the Humanist Report, it'll be Rational National, and then some of Michael Brooks and the Majority Report are usually the mainstream ones that I put in there. Usually I might add a little Jamie Peck or something else in there as well, but that's usually like the 4 or 5 that I put on there. It would be amazing to see more voices get promoted as well. Like, I would love if there was, for example, a woman who's as prominent as Sam Cedar is. I would love to see members of the trans community get anywhere near those kind of numbers, right? It would be awesome if we had way more like diversity and promotion and that kind of stuff. Like, that is to put a bow on this whole thing. The id poll that Dave Rubin likes to pull that's the wrong kind. But the good kind is promoting and collaborating and working with other creators of a variety of, diversity is a beautiful thing. It
absolutely. Yeah. It can't just be like 5 white dudes who you get all your left-wing news from. Like, it has to be really diverse perspectives. I think that's really important. Like, you need a balanced diet of different lefty takes, so diversify who you listen to. And yeah, we'll try to help with that for sure. How often do you stream per day? Or like, is it like a 2-hour stream? Like, how long do you go for usually?
I'm Monday to Friday, usually about 4 hours a day, depends on the load. If it's a really heavy news day, how much stuff is going down. And then there's a segment that I do every day where I just pick apart ghouls. So I'll just laugh at PragerU. I'll laugh at Paul Joseph Watson. We'll just line up all these things. We were looking at Alex Jones today, and obviously it can be vexing, it can be taxing, but at the same time, that to me is something that I find that I've become decent at in the sense that I'm okay at improv comedy when I'm looking at it really helps that their talking points are always the same. Because the research isn't too extensive, so there's times when, and I just talked about it earlier, when I really messed this up, and I should have done way more diligent research when it came to Mike Brown and Ferguson. But for the most part, they have the same 10 talking points. It's basically the attack helicopter comedy equivalent of their right wing conservative points, and they'll just regurgitate them in different forms.
Yeah. I was going to ask you about that, but that does make sense because like I feel like after I film, like if I put a lot of research and like thought into a piece, like by the time I'm towards the end of that, like filming, I can't speak. Like I go like in Trump mode, and it's like I'm slurring over my words because it's like so much energy to like try to really focus and like get it out there in a really specific way, because like we're covering topics that are like really complex. And like if you say like just one word incorrect in a sentence, that can like change the entire meaning of like a particular policy, especially like when we're like really knee deep in like Medicare for all, for example, which I haven't done one of those in a while. But yeah, they do make it easier.
Unfortunately, you won't be able to, it looks like.
Yeah, we're never getting it, so you know.
You gotta laugh or you're gonna cry.
Exactly. So if there's nothing else that you want to talk about, then we can end here, and I would really just encourage everyone to please subscribe to The Serfs everywhere, both channels and on Twitch. If you're not, then I will ban you and cancel you from watching the Humanist Report. Well, that's it. I've got nothing left to talk about. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the show. Thanks so much to my guest, Lance from The Serfs. Check out their channel. There will be links down below. And usual, we're not going to end the show without thanking all of our Patreon, PayPal, and YouTube members for helping the show not just to survive, but thrive as well. Thank you all so much. I've got nothing left to say, so I'm going to stop talking. I'll see you all next week. I'm Mike Figueredo. This is the Humanist Report. Take care.
Tremendous, 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 tremendous.